Racist man punches little black girl on an airplane. Navy SEAL sees everything and takes action. A closed fist connects with soft skin. The sound, sharp, definitive, unmistakable, cuts through the ambient drone of jet engines. Time freezes. 64 passengers inhale collectively, their breaths held hostage by shock. On United Airlines Flight 1287 from Chicago to San Francisco, a line has been crossed that cannot be uncrossed, and a man sitting in 14C is about to learn that some actions cannot be hidden at 37,000 feet. Blood trickles from 11-year-old Zoe Williams' nose as she stares, wide-eyed with disbelief, at the red-faced man towering over her. Her small body trembles, the echo of violence still reverberating through her bones. 3 rows back, former Navy SEAL Commander Marcus Reed's hand instinctively moves to where his service weapon would have been. 22 years of military discipline barely contain the fury igniting within him. His eyes, trained to assess threats in milliseconds, lock onto the aggressor, a middle-aged white man in a rumpled business suit whose alcohol-fueled rage has just exploded onto a child. "She attacked me first," the man slurs, his finger jabbing the air accusingly. Everyone saw it. But Marcus saw everything, and what he witnessed was nothing like what the man claims. But to understand how we got here, how a routine 5-hour flight transformed into a powder keg of racial tension, misunderstanding, and violence, we need to go back to 3 hours earlier, when Flight 1287 was still on the ground at O'Hare International Airport. If you're wondering what really happened on that flight, and why a decorated military veteran would soon risk everything to intervene, please subscribe now to follow this extraordinary story of justice, perception, and redemption. Gate C-17 buzzes with the familiar energy of a delayed departure. Passengers cluster near charging stations, faces illuminated by the blue glow of smartphones. The September sun struggles to penetrate the terminal's tinted windows, casting long afternoon shadows across the gleaming floor. Zoe Williams clutches her backpack straps, staying close to her father's side. At 11, she's flown enough to understand the routine, but not enough to feel comfortable with it. Her father, Dr. James Williams, 48, juggles his boarding pass and ID while trying to maintain eye contact with the colleague on the other end of his call. "I understand the conference committee has concerns, but our research is solid," James says, his voice carrying the practiced patience of a man accustomed to defending his work. "The correlation between early childhood nutrition and cognitive development in underserved communities can't be ignored any longer." Zoe's attention drifts from her father's conversation to the people around them. Her eyes, perceptive beyond her years, scan the gate area. She notices a businessman frowning at his watch, tapping its face as if that might somehow speed up time, and an elderly couple sharing a crossword puzzle, their heads bent together in quiet collaboration. The businessman catches her looking and his frown deepens. "What are you staring at?" he mutters, just loud enough for her to hear. Zoe quickly looks away, a familiar heaviness settling in her chest. It's a sensation she's becoming increasingly familiar with, the weight of being seen as something other than just a child. "We're boarding now, baby girl," her father says, ending his call and gently squeezing her shoulder. James Williams stands 6'3", his academic credentials matched by his imposing physical presence. Yet he moves through the world with a deliberate gentleness, a necessity he's explained to Zoe more than once. "Group 3, he adds, checking their boarding passes. "That'll be in about 10 minutes. Across the gate area, Richard Cunningham downs the last of his airport bar scotch, grimacing as the ice cubes hit his teeth. At 58, he spent 27 years in commercial real estate development, and the last 3 watching his carefully constructed empire show dangerous cracks. Today's meeting with Chicago investors hadn't gone well. Market contraction and risk exposure were the euphemisms they'd used while declining to fund his newest project, a luxury condominium development that would have pulled him back from the financial precipice he's been teetering on since his divorce. "Final boarding call for United Airlines Flight 1287 to San Francisco," the gate agent announces, her voice artificially cheerful. Richard shoulders his way to the front, despite his Group 4 designation. Behind him, someone clears their throat disapprovingly, but he pretends not to hear. Small victories matter when the big ones keep eluding you. "Sir, we're currently boarding Group 3, the gate agent says, her smile remaining fixed as she points to his boarding pass. "My meeting ran late," Richard lies smoothly. "I have a connection to make in San Francisco." The gate agent hesitates, then relents with a small nod. Richard feels a petty satisfaction as he steps onto the jet bridge. At least someone still respects his authority. Neither Richard nor the Williams family notices the quiet, observant man standing off to the side. Marcus Reed, 45, waits patiently for his group to be called, his military-honed posture making him appear taller than his 6 feet. 15 years as a Navy SEAL and 7 more as a private security consultant have taught him the value of situational awareness. He registers the frustrated businessman, the polite academic, and his daughter cataloging details without judgment, a professional habit he's never managed to break. Marcus is heading to San Francisco for his niece's wedding, his first family gathering since his sister's passing 3 years ago. In his jacket pocket, he carries her photograph, Sandra in her favorite red dress, laughing at something off camera. He touches the pocket briefly, a silent promise to be present for her daughter in a way his military career never allowed him to be for Sandra. As boarding continues, the temperature on the plane rises with each passing minute. A mechanical issue has delayed departure, and the air conditioning runs at minimal capacity while the aircraft remains at the gate. Zoe and her father settle into their seats, 13A and 13B, in the economy section. James carefully stows their carry-ons, his movements economical in the confined space. "Daddy, can I have the window?" Zoe asks, her eyes already fixed on the ground crew outside. "Of course, sweetheart," James says, switching places with her. He pulls out a scientific journal from his bag before stowing it under the seat in front of him. Richard Cunningham arrives at row 13, checking his boarding pass against the seat numbers. His assigned seat is 14C, 1 row behind, but he frowns at the crowded overhead compartments. "Excuse me," he says to James, his voice carrying an edge that suggests it's not really a request. "I need to put my bag up here." James glances up from his journal. "I believe the compartments above our seats are already full, sir. Perhaps check the ones further back." Richard's jaw tightens. "I've been flying twice a week for 20 years. I know how overhead bins work." Before James can respond, Richard is already shoving his expensive leather briefcase into a small gap, crushing a soft-sided bag in the process. A flight attendant approaches, her expression professional but concerned. "Sir, we need to make sure all bags are properly secured before takeoff. If your bag doesn't fit, we'll be happy to gate check it for you." "It fits just fine," Richard snaps, giving the compartment door an extra push to close it. The flight attendant's smile doesn't waver. "Please take your assigned seat, sir. We're preparing for departure." Richard moves to row 14, his frustration building as he sees the middle seat that awaits him. On either side are already seated passengers. A heavy-set man by the window who spills slightly into the middle space, and a young woman with large headphones on the aisle who doesn't look up from her book as he arrives. As Richard settles in, he becomes acutely aware of the limited space. The man by the window offers an apologetic smile but can't make himself smaller. The air feels stagnant. Richard loosens his tie and glances at his watch, already 40 minutes delayed. "Ladies and gentlemen," the captain's voice crackles over the intercom, "this is Captain Reynolds speaking. I apologize for the delay. Our maintenance team is addressing a minor issue with one of our sensors. We expect to have this resolved within the next 15 minutes, and then we'll be on our way to San Francisco. The flight attendants will be coming through the cabin with water while we wait. Thank you for your patience." A collective sigh ripples through the cabin. Richard closes his eyes, leaning his head back against the seat. The day's failures press down on him like a physical weight. The rejected proposal, the looming bank payments. The awkward call with his ex-wife about reducing his alimony until things turn around. All of it swirls in his mind as sweat begins to bead on his forehead in the increasingly warm cabin. 3 rows ahead, Marcus Reed observes the rising tension in the cabin with professional detachment. He notes the businessman's barely contained frustration, the flight attendant's practiced calm, the occasional flare of tempers as passengers shift uncomfortably in the heat. From his vantage point in seat 11D, he can see most of the cabin without being obvious about his surveillance, another habit from his former life. His seatmate, an elderly woman named Dorothy who proudly informed him she'd been flying to visit her grandchildren since 1981, fans herself with the safety information card. "Never liked O'Hare," she confides to Marcus. "Always some delay or another. Back in '97, I was stuck here for 6 hours because of a snowstorm." "Missed my grandson's piano recital." She pats Marcus's arm. "But you military boys know all about patience, don't you? My Harold was Army, served in Vietnam." Marcus offers a polite smile. "Different era, ma'am, different challenges. But the same dedication," Dorothy says firmly. "I can always spot it. Something in the posture, the eyes, always alert, aren't you?" Before Marcus can respond, a flight attendant approaches with a tray of water cups. "Would either of you like some water while we wait?" As they accept the small plastic cups, the plane suddenly lurches forward slightly, then settles back. The movement sends a ripple of whispered concerns through the cabin. Just the jetway being repositioned, the flight attendant assures them. Nothing to worry about. But worry has already begun its insidious spread through the confined space of Flight 1287. Each passing minute of delay, each degree of rising temperature, each small frustration compounds upon the last, creating a pressure cooker of human emotion that will soon reach its breaking point. 2 hours into the delay, with the aircraft still at the gate but passengers required to remain seated, the atmosphere has grown decidedly tense. The airline has distributed complimentary snacks and beverages, a gesture that did little to appease the increasingly restless travelers. Richard Cunningham has already consumed 3 miniature bottles of scotch, purchased in quick succession as soon as the beverage service began. Each one goes down easier than the last, blurring the edges of his frustration without eliminating it entirely. In row 13, Zoe Williams has finished her book and now fidgets uncomfortably in her seat. The heat makes her cotton t-shirt stick to her back, and the recycled air leaves her throat dry despite the water her father keeps encouraging her to drink. "How much longer, Daddy?" she asks, not for the first time. James checks his watch. "I'm not sure, sweetheart. They said they're waiting for a part." Zoe sighs dramatically, the sound of childhood impatience universal across generations. "Can I at least get my colored pencils? I want to draw." "Of course." James reaches under the seat for her backpack, retrieving a well-worn tin of colored pencils and a sketchbook. "Just be careful not to drop any. They'll roll everywhere in this slanted cabin." As Zoe begins to draw, her elbow occasionally bumps against the seat in front of her, small, unconscious movements as she concentrates on her artwork. In seat 14C, Richard feels each tiny jolt against his seat back, each one striking his alcohol-amplified nerves like a physical affront. The first time, he ignores it. The second time, he shifts in his seat. By the third jostle, he turns and peers between the seats. "Hey," he calls out, his voice carrying more volume than necessary in the quiet cabin. "Can you stop kicking my seat?" James glances up, momentarily confused, then realizes Richard is addressing his daughter. "Zoe, are you kicking the seat in front of you?" "No, Daddy," Zoe responds, genuinely perplexed. "I'm just drawing." She holds up her sketchbook as if it might serve as evidence. James turns back to Richard. "I don't believe she's kicking your seat, sir. Perhaps it's just the movement of the plane." Richard's face flushes. "I know what a kid kicking my seat feels like." "She's drawing," James explains calmly. "Her arm might be bumping your seat occasionally. Zoe, try to be more aware of the space, okay?" "Okay, Daddy," she nods, pulling her elbows in closer to her body and resuming her artwork with exaggerated care. Richard turns back around, muttering something under his breath that James chooses not to hear. The incident seems resolved, but the undercurrent of tension remains, flowing beneath the surface of forced civility. In row 11, Marcus Reed has observed the interaction without appearing to. His attention catches on the businessman's body language, the rigid shoulders, the flushed face, the slightly slurred speech. Warning signs he's been trained to recognize. He makes a mental note to stay alert but doesn't intervene. Not his place. Not yet. 20 minutes later, Zoe accidentally drops a colored pencil that rolls forward under Richard's seat. Without thinking, she unbuckles her seatbelt and slips down to retrieve it, her small hand reaching under the seat in front of her. Richard feels something touch his ankle and jerks his foot away. "What the hell?" he exclaims, louder than appropriate. Zoe quickly withdraws her hand, pencil retrieved, and sits back in her seat. "Sorry," she says in a small voice. "I dropped my pencil." Richard twists around in his seat again, his face now visibly red. "Keep your hands to yourself, kid, and control your child," he adds, glaring at James. James straightens in his seat, his academic demeanor giving way to paternal protection. "My daughter apologized for accidentally touching you while retrieving her pencil. I'd appreciate if you'd moderate your language and tone when speaking to her." "Oh, I need to moderate my tone?" Richard's voice rises further. "How about you moderate your kid?" Some of us are trying to endure this flight in peace. Several nearby passengers begin to take notice of the escalating situation. A flight attendant approaches from the front of the cabin. "Is everything all right here?" she asks, her practiced smile strained after hours of managing passenger frustrations. "No, everything is not all right," Richard says before James can respond. "I've been dealing with this kid disturbing me the entire time we've been stuck here." "Sir, please lower your voice," the flight attendant says firmly. James takes a deep breath before speaking. "My daughter accidentally dropped a pencil and touched this gentleman's foot while retrieving it. She apologized immediately. That's the extent of the disturbance." The flight attendant nods. "I understand, sir," she addresses Richard. "It sounds like this was just an accident. We're all trying to make the best of a difficult situation. Can I get you anything to help make you more comfortable?" Richard's jaw works as he visibly restrains himself. No, he finally says. Just tell them to keep their hands and feet on their side. We'll all be mindful of personal space, the flight attendant says diplomatically. We should be taking off shortly. The captain has just informed me that the replacement part has arrived. As she moves away, Zoe leans close to her father. Daddy, I really didn't mean to bother him, she whispers. James puts his arm around her shoulders. I know, baby girl. Some people just have a hard time being their best selves when they're uncomfortable. It's not about you. But Zoe, with the acute perception of children who have already begun to understand the complexities of the adult world, isn't entirely convinced. She closes her sketchbook and stares out the window instead, watching as ground crew members finally begin to prepare the aircraft for departure. In row 11, Marcus Reed has witnessed the entire exchange. The businessman's disproportionate reaction concerns him. He's seen this pattern before, minor provocations leading to major overreactions. In confined spaces like aircraft cabins, such situations can escalate quickly. He makes eye contact with the flight attendant as she passes, giving her a subtle nod that communicates both awareness and availability should the situation deteriorate further. The aircraft finally pushes back from the gate nearly 3 hours after its scheduled departure time. As the engines roar to life and the air conditioning begins to function properly again, there's a palpable sense of relief throughout the cabin. The temperature gradually becomes more comfortable, and the promise of finally being underway seems to temporarily soothe frayed nerves. But Marcus Reed knows better than to assume the tension has dissipated entirely. In his experience, the residue of conflict rarely evaporates so easily. As the plane taxis toward the runway, he keeps his situational awareness heightened, his military instincts telling him that the incident between the businessman and the young girl might not be fully resolved. He isn't wrong, and what happens next will force him to make a decision that will change the lives of everyone involved. The aircraft climbs steadily through cloud cover, leaving Chicago's sprawling cityscape behind. The seatbelt sign remains illuminated as the plane encounters mild turbulence, not uncommon for September weather patterns over the Midwest. The cabin lights dim slightly, creating an artificial twilight despite the afternoon hour outside. In row 14, Richard Cunningham stares straight ahead, jaw clenched. The scotch in his system has formed a toxic partnership with his wounded pride and professional disappointments. Each small turbulence bump seems to knock loose another fragment of his carefully constructed self-control. He keeps replaying the interaction in his mind, but with each mental repetition, the perceived slight grows more intentional, more disrespectful. In his alcohol-distorted recollection, the girl wasn't apologetic but smirking. The father wasn't calm but condescending. The flight attendant didn't mediate but took their side against him. In row 13, Zoe has fallen into an uneasy sleep against her father's shoulder, the excitement and stress of the day having exhausted her. James gently adjusts her position so her neck won't be sore when she wakes, then returns to reviewing his conference notes, occasionally glancing at his daughter with the quiet wonder that has never faded since her birth. The plane encounters a more significant patch of turbulence. It drops suddenly, then stabilizes. The movement jostles passengers throughout the cabin, including Zoe, whose head bumps against the seat in front of her. The contact is minor, no different than the dozens of similar incidents that occur on flights every day. But to Richard Cunningham, it feels deliberate, the final straw. He unbuckles his seatbelt and twists around fully in his seat, facing the Williams family. "That's it," he says, his voice carrying above the engine noise. "I've had enough of your kid." James looks up, startled by both the words and their venomous delivery. "Excuse me?" "You heard me," Richard continues, his speech slightly slurred. "First kicking my seat, then grabbing at me, now hitting my seat again. You people think you can just do whatever you want." The phrase, "you people," hangs in the air, its implications unmistakable. A few nearby passengers shift uncomfortably. Others pretend not to hear, fixing their gazes on seatback screens or out windows. James' expression hardens, but his voice remains measured. "Sir, my daughter is asleep. The turbulence caused her to bump your seat. It was not intentional, and I'd appreciate if you'd sit down and lower your voice before you wake her." "Don't tell me what to do," Richard says, rising further from his seat despite the illuminated seatbelt sign. "Maybe if you taught her some manners." "Sir," a flight attendant interrupts, approaching quickly from the front galley. "You need to return to your seat immediately and fasten your seatbelt. We're experiencing turbulence." Richard ignores her, his attention fixed on James. "I've been nothing but patient with your lack of parenting, but I'm done." Zoe stirs, awakened by the commotion. She blinks in confusion, taking in the angry man looming over their seats. James places a protective arm across his daughter. "Please return to your seat, sir. You're frightening my child." "Frightening her?" Richard scoffs. Maybe she needs to learn that actions have consequences. In row 11, Marcus Reed is already on high alert. The businessman's body language has shifted from agitated to potentially threatening. Marcus unbuckles his seatbelt, ready to intervene if necessary, though still hoping the flight crew can de-escalate the situation. "Sir, this is your final warning," the flight attendant says firmly. "Return to your seat now, or I'll need to report this incident to the captain." "Go ahead," Richard says dismissively. "I'm just having a conversation here." Zoe, now fully awake, shrinks against her father. "Daddy," she whispers, her voice trembling. "It's okay, baby girl," James assures her, though his eyes never leave Richard's face. "This gentleman is just upset about the turbulence. He's going back to his seat now." The plane hits another patch of rough air. It drops suddenly, then lurches upward. The movement catches Richard off balance. He stumbles slightly, one hand gripping the headrest of James' seat to steady himself. "See what you made me do?" he accuses, irrationally blaming them for his loss of balance. "Sir," the flight attendant's voice is sharp now. "Sit down immediately." Zoe, frightened by both the turbulence and the angry man, begins to cry quietly. "I want to go home," she says. Something in Richard snaps at the sound of her tears. In his alcohol-fogged mind, her crying seems manipulative, a ploy to make him look like the villain. "Stop that fake crying," he demands, leaning closer. "You know exactly what you're doing." James rises partway from his seat, his patience finally exhausted. "Back away from my daughter, now." The two men are face to face now, separated by just the width of the seatback. The flight attendant is calling for assistance on her handset. Other passengers are turning to watch, some recording with their phones, others calling out for both men to calm down. In the narrow confines of the economy cabin, tension crackles like static electricity. Richard's face is flushed almost purple now, a vein throbbing visibly at his temple. James stands protective, his academic calm replaced by the more primal instinct of a father shielding his child. Zoe, caught between them, looks from one adult to the other with wide, fearful eyes. A fresh tear tracks down her cheek. Richard sees the tear and in his distorted perception reads it as the ultimate manipulation. "I told you to stop that," he says, and before anyone can react, his hand swings out. The blow catches Zoe on the side of her face, not a full punch, but a backhanded strike fueled by alcohol and rage. The sound of it, sharp, definitive, unmistakable, cuts through the ambient drone of jet engines. Time freezes. 64 passengers inhale collectively, their breaths held hostage by shock. Blood trickles from 11-year-old Zoe Williams' nose as she stares, wide-eyed with disbelief, at the red-faced man towering over her. Her small body trembles, the echo of violence still reverberating through her bones. 3 rows back, former Navy SEAL Commander Marcus Reed's hand instinctively moves to where his service weapon would have been. 22 years of military discipline barely contain the fury igniting within him. His eyes, trained to assess threats in milliseconds, lock onto the aggressor, a middle-aged white man in a rumpled business suit whose alcohol-fueled rage has just exploded onto a child. "She attacked me first," Richard slurs, his finger jabbing the air accusingly. "Everyone saw it," but Marcus saw everything, and what he witnessed was nothing like what the man claims. As James lunges toward Richard, as flight attendants rush forward, as passengers cry out in horror and outrage, Marcus Reed makes his move. What happens next will test the limits of justice, perception, and redemption at 37,000 feet, where there's nowhere to run and nowhere to hide from the consequences of one's actions. To continue following this extraordinary story of what happens when prejudice, misunderstanding, and heroism collide at 37,000 feet, please subscribe now and comment below where you're watching from. The shocking next chapter reveals why this incident was much more complicated than it first appears. In the suspended moment after Richard's hand connects with Zoe's face, the aircraft cabin becomes a vacuum, all sound seemingly sucked out into the stratosphere. Then, like a dam breaking, chaos erupts. James Williams moves with the focused fury of a father whose child has been harmed. His large frame launches forward, academic restraint abandoned. "You put your hands on my daughter." The words emerge as both question and accusation, each syllable vibrating with controlled rage. Richard staggers back, suddenly aware of what he's done but unwilling to accept responsibility. She was doing it on purpose. He shouts, pointing an accusing finger at Zoe, who sits frozen, one hand touching the blood trickling from her nose. Tell them how you've been tormenting me this whole flight." From row 11, Marcus Reed is already in motion. Unlike James, whose movements are powered by paternal instinct and adrenaline, Marcus moves with the precision of someone who has navigated countless high-stakes situations. 22 years in naval special warfare didn't just build his body. It programmed his reflexes to respond to threats with calculated efficiency. If you've ever wondered what happens when someone crosses an unforgivable line at 37,000 feet, and what drives a highly trained military veteran to intervene in a civilian crisis, please subscribe now to see how this extraordinary confrontation unfolds. Marcus reaches Richard in 3 seconds flat. His hand clamps down on Richard's shoulder with enough pressure to command attention without causing injury, a technique perfected in far more dangerous environments than a commercial aircraft. "Stand down," Marcus says, his voice quiet but carrying the unmistakable authority that once commanded elite teams in combat zones. "You've made a serious mistake." Richard attempts to shake off Marcus's grip, alcohol and anger overriding his survival instinct. "Get your hands off me. This isn't your business." "You made it my business when you struck a child," Marcus replies, maintaining his hold while positioning himself between Richard and the Williams family. "Now sit down before you make things worse for yourself." Flight attendants converge from both ends of the cabin. The lead flight attendant, Sharon Davis, a 27-year veteran of the airline, takes immediate control of the situation. "Sir, you need to return to your seat immediately," she tells Richard, then turns to Marcus. "Sir, I appreciate your assistance, but I need you to return to your seat as well." "Ma'am, I'm former military," Marcus says, showing her his retired military ID without releasing his hold on Richard. "I'm trained in de-escalation. This man is intoxicated and has just assaulted a minor. I suggest restraining him until we can land." Sharon assesses the situation with the practiced eye of someone who began her career when Pan AM still ruled the skies. Back then they called her job stewardess, a term she still occasionally uses with a knowing smile when reminiscing with colleagues from that era. She's seen everything from medical emergencies to marriage proposals, but violence against a child is a line that transforms her professional demeanor into something harder. "We have restraints in the galley," she says with a curt nod. "Keep him contained while I notify the captain." James has reached Zoe now, kneeling beside her seat. With gentle hands that belie his fury, he tilts her chin up to examine her injury. "I'm here, baby girl, I'm right here." Zoe's eyes are wide with shock, tears pooling but not falling. "Daddy, why did he hit me?" The question pierces the cabin's chaos, its innocent bewilderment cutting through the adult commotion like a spotlight through fog. Several rows back, Linda Harmon, 64, clutches her husband's arm. "I don't think that man meant to hit her," she whispers, loudly enough for nearby passengers to hear. "I saw that girl kicking his seat earlier. Children today have no discipline." Next to her, Michael Chen, 42, already has his phone out recording. "Are you serious?" he asks, incredulous. "The guy just punched a kid. I got it all on video, too." "He didn't punch her," Linda insists, her worldview requiring this reinterpretation. "His hand it was the turbulence." She was provoking him. "Ma'am," says Sofia Rodriguez, 53, from across the aisle, her voice carrying the no-nonsense tone developed over 28 years as a public school teacher in Chicago. "I was watching the whole time. That child did nothing wrong. That man is drunk and dangerous." As flight attendants return with restraints, Richard's resistance intensifies. "I'm not some criminal. That kid and her father have been antagonizing me this entire flight. You're all seeing what you want to see." Marcus maintains his hold, using minimal force with maximum effect. "Sir, the only person escalating this situation is you. There are dozens of witnesses and at least one video recording. I suggest you cooperate and save whatever explanation you have for the authorities on the ground." The flight attendants secure Richard's wrists with plastic restraints, similar to the ones used by police but adapted for aircraft use. As they guide him toward an empty row at the back of the plane, he continues to protest. "You're making a huge mistake. Do you know who I am? I have connections." Sharon hands Zoe a clean cloth with ice wrapped inside. "Hold this to your nose, sweetie. It'll help with the swelling." To James, she says, "Sir, I need to know if you want to press charges once we land. The captain is diverting to Denver. We'll have law enforcement meet the aircraft." James, still focused on Zoe, nods grimly. "Yes, absolutely." The captain's voice comes over the intercom, steady and professional. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Reynolds speaking. Due to a situation in the cabin, we'll be making an unscheduled landing in Denver. Our estimated arrival time is approximately 40 minutes. Please remain in your seats with your seatbelts fastened. Flight attendants, prepare the cabin for arrival." A collective groan ripples through the passengers not directly involved in or witness to the incident. A businessman in the front row checks his watch, the same model Rolex that was considered the height of success in 1987 when he received it as a gift from his father. A college student further back removes her AirPods, a far cry from the bulky Walkman her parents once described using on flights. Marcus returns to his seat as instructed, though he positions himself where he can maintain visual contact with both Richard and the Williams family. Dorothy, his elderly seatmate, pats his hand. In my day, a man who hit a child would have gotten worse than plastic cuffs, she says with surprising steel in her voice. My Harold, God rest his soul, would have thrown him right off the plane, cruising altitude be damned. Marcus offers a tight smile. Different regulations now, ma'am. Regulations, Dorothy scoffs. Some things transcend regulations, young man. In row 13, James has moved to the middle seat, allowing Zoe to lean against him while maintaining pressure on her nose. The bleeding has mostly stopped, but a bruise is beginning to form. More concerning to James is the distant look in his daughter's eyes, a look he recognizes from his research with traumatized children. You're safe now, he murmurs into her hair. I won't let anyone hurt you. Zoe nods against his shoulder but doesn't speak. Her fingers work rhythmically against the hem of her shirt, a self-soothing gesture James has noticed becoming more frequent in recent months. 3 rows back, secured in a window seat with a flight attendant monitoring him closely, Richard Cunningham's rage has begun to curdle into something darker, a toxic blend of shame and self-justification. The alcohol in his system is no longer providing comfortable numbness, but is instead sharpening his sense of persecution. You don't understand, he tells the flight attendant monitoring him. This isn't what it looks like. That kid has been pushing my buttons since Chicago. Her father thinks the rules don't apply to them. The flight attendant, Jason, maintains a neutral expression. At 48, he's worked for the airline long enough to recognize the descent into self-delusion that often follows unacceptable behavior. Sir, I need you to remain quiet until we land. Just like that. You're not even going to hear my side? Richard demands, his voice rising again. This is the problem with America today. Nobody listens. It's all about who plays the victim better. Jason's expression doesn't change, but his voice drops lower. Sir, continuing to disrupt this flight could result in federal charges in addition to the assault. I strongly advise you to remain silent until we're on the ground. The mention of federal charges finally penetrates Richard's haze of indignation. He slumps back in his seat, the gravity of his situation beginning to register. Through the window, he watches the vast expanse of America pass beneath them, farmland and mountains and highways connecting cities where millions of lives unfold, none currently as derailed as his own. The aircraft begins its descent into Denver. Flight attendants move efficiently through the cabin, checking that seatbelts are fastened, tray tables are stowed, and the passengers directly involved in the incident are stable. Sharon kneels briefly beside Zoe. You're being very brave, she tells the girl. When I started flying back when dinosaurs roamed the earth, she adds with a wink, they taught us that the bravest passengers were always the youngest ones. This earns a small smile from Zoe, the first since the incident. James mouths a silent thank you to Sharon, recognizing her attempt to connect with his daughter. In row 11, Marcus is writing something in a small notebook. Dorothy watches with undisguised curiosity. Military habit, he explains, noticing her interest. Document everything while it's fresh. Smart man, Dorothy approves. My Harold always said memory is the first casualty in any conflict. Marcus continues writing. Your husband sounds like he was a wise man. Korean War, Dorothy says, her eyes distant with memory, came back with a Purple Heart and enough nightmares to last a lifetime, but he never lost his sense of right and wrong. She studies Marcus's face. You've seen combat too. It's not a question, but Marcus nods anyway. Yes, ma'am. And now you're going to your niece's wedding, she recalls from their earlier conversation. Life goes on, doesn't it, even after all the darkness? It has to, Marcus replies simply. Throughout the cabin, passengers speak in hushed tones, sharing theories and observations about what they've witnessed. The incident has transformed a plane full of strangers into a community bound by collective experience, though not a unified one. Different perspectives emerge, shaped by generation, background, and the literal vantage point from which each person observed the confrontation. The guy clearly has issues, but that kid was being annoying, one passenger whispers to another. My grandkids would never behave like that on a plane. Are you kidding me? Responds his seatmate. She was just being a child. That man is dangerous and belongs in jail. In seat 17F, Sofia Rodriguez has been taking notes of her own. As a former teacher who spent nearly 3 decades in Chicago's public school system, she's no stranger to conflict resolution and mandatory reporting. She makes eye contact with Michael Chen, who's still holding his phone. You got it all, she asks quietly. He nods. From when he first stood up, clear as day. Good, Sofia says firmly. That poor child deserves justice. The plane banks gently as it approaches Denver International Airport. Through the windows on the right side, passengers can see the distinctive white peaks of the terminal designed to evoke the snow-capped Rocky Mountains. The structure, completed in 1995, replaced the old Stapleton Airport that many of the older passengers remember using in decades past. Another marker of time's passage, of the old giving way to the new. If this story of confrontation, justice, and the unexpected connections formed in moments of crisis has captured your attention, please subscribe now. What happens next when they land in Denver will reveal shocking truths about each character that no one on the plane could have anticipated. Captain Reynolds executes a smooth landing. As the aircraft taxis toward the gate, Sharon addresses the cabin. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've arrived at Denver International Airport. Local authorities will be boarding the aircraft first. We ask that all passengers remain seated with your seatbelts fastened until instructed otherwise. Those continuing on to San Francisco will receive updated departure information once available." James keeps his arm around Zoe, who has remained quiet throughout the descent. He checks his watch, the same Timex his father gave him when he graduated high school, analog in a digital world. The delay and diversion mean he'll miss the opening reception of the conference, but that concern seems trivial now compared to his daughter's well-being. "How are you doing, sweetheart?" he asks softly. Zoe's response is barely audible. "Is this because I'm Black Daddy?" The question hits James like a physical blow. He chooses his words carefully, aware of listening ears around them. "What happened isn't your fault in any way. That man made terrible choices because of his own problems." "But he didn't hit anyone else," Zoe persists with the incisive logic of children. "Just me." Before James can respond, the aircraft door opens. 2 Denver police officers board, followed by a representative from the airline. They confer briefly with the flight attendants, who direct them toward Richard first. Marcus observes the officers' approach, noting their professionalism as they identify themselves to Richard and explain that he's being detained for questioning regarding an assault. Richard, now facing the concrete reality of law enforcement, adopts a new strategy. "This is a misunderstanding," he says, his voice suddenly conciliatory. "I'm happy to explain everything at the gate. There's no need for handcuffs." The older officer, whose nameplate reads Ramirez, is unmoved. "Sir, please stand and place your hands behind your back. You're being detained pending investigation of an assault on a minor." As the officers escort Richard from the aircraft, he locks eyes with Marcus briefly. The look contains both hostility and something else, a flicker of recognition, perhaps, that he's encountered someone who saw through him completely. Once Richard is removed, the officers approach the Williams family. The younger officer, Bennett, crouches down to Zoe's eye level, a technique taught in modern community policing but not always practiced. "Hello there," he says gently. "My name is Officer Bennett." "Can you tell me your name?" "Zoe Williams," she responds quietly. "That's a beautiful name, Zoe. I understand something scary happened on the plane. Would you and your dad be willing to talk with us about it at the gate? We want to make sure you're okay." James appreciates the officer's approach. "Of course, we'll cooperate fully." As they prepare to deplane, Sharon hands James a form. "This is an incident report. The airline will need your statement, and there will be options for medical attention here at the airport if needed." James takes the form, his academic mind already cataloging the procedural elements, the documentation that transforms a moment of chaos into an official record, something he's familiar with from his research work. Marcus waits for most passengers to deplane before standing. As he passes the Williams row, Zoe looks up at him with solemn eyes. "Thank you for helping us," she says with the simple directness of childhood. Marcus pauses. "You're welcome, Zoe. You were very brave." "Are you a policeman?" she asks. "No," Marcus replies with a small smile. "I used to be in the Navy." "Like Top Gun?" Zoe asks, referencing the movie her father had reluctantly allowed her to watch last year, explaining it was a classic from his day. Marcus chuckles. "Something like that." In the terminal, passengers from Flight 1287 cluster in small groups, discussing the incident and their delayed journey. The airline has already begun making arrangements for those continuing to San Francisco, offering meal vouchers and access to the premium lounge, a peace offering for the disruption. Denver police have established a temporary interview area in a private room near the gate. James and Zoe are seated in comfortable chairs, a female officer now present as well due to Zoe's age and gender. "Mr. Williams, we'd like to get your statement about what happened," Officer Ramirez explains. "We'll need to document your daughter's injury as well with your permission." James nods. "Of course, and I'd like to press charges to the fullest extent possible." "Understood, sir. The passenger in question is being held for questioning. Based on preliminary reports and witness statements, he'll likely face charges of assault on a minor, among other potential federal violations related to interference with a flight crew." As James begins giving his statement, carefully recounting the events leading up to the assault, The door opens and Marcus is escorted in by Officer Bennett. "Sorry to interrupt," Bennett says, "but this gentleman has information relevant to the case." Marcus nods respectfully to James and Zoe. "I witnessed the entire incident. I also have something that might be helpful." He produces his phone. "I recorded portions of the interaction, force of habit from my security work." Officer Ramirez raises an eyebrow. "You recorded it?" "I began recording when I noticed the passenger becoming agitated," Marcus explains. "In my line of work, documentation prevents misunderstandings." James looks at Marcus with new understanding. "You're not just military, are you?" "Former Navy SEAL," Marcus says simply. "Currently working in private security consulting." The revelation lands differently with each person in the room. To Officer Ramirez, it explains the man's composed handling of a volatile situation. To James, it suggests a level of training and discipline that likely prevented the incident from escalating further. To Zoe, whose knowledge of military special forces comes primarily from movies and television, it transforms the quiet man into something approaching a superhero. "Can we see the recording?" Officer Ramirez asks. Marcus hands over his phone. "It begins approximately 2 minutes before the assault." As the officers review the footage, their expressions harden. The video clearly shows Richard's unprovoked aggression, Zoe's confusion, and the moment of impact. But it also captures something that had gone unnoticed in the chaos: Richard's muttered comments before the assault, including a racial slur uttered under his breath. Officer Ramirez looks up from the phone. "This changes things. We'll be adding a hate crime enhancement to the charges." James's expression is a complex mixture of vindication and sorrow. No parent wants confirmation that their child has been targeted because of their race, yet the evidence ensures that justice will be more complete. Zoe, observing the adult's reactions, connects the dots with painful clarity. "So it was because I'm black," she says quietly, not a question this time. James puts his arm around her shoulders. "Some people's hearts are infected with hate, baby girl. That's their burden to carry, not yours." Marcus, watching this exchange, thinks of his sister Sandra, of her daughter, his niece Jasmine, now preparing for her wedding in San Francisco. Of the conversations Sandra had with Jasmine years ago, so similar to the one James is having with Zoe now. The explanations no parent should have to give, the armor no child should have to wear. "Mr. Reed," Officer Bennett says, interrupting his thoughts, "we'll need an official statement from you as well." As Marcus begins his statement, the door opens again. A woman in an airline uniform enters, introducing herself as Diane Patterson, Customer Service Director for the airline's Denver operations. "Mr. Williams, Ms. Williams," she says with practiced empathy, "I want to personally apologize for your experience today. The airline has a zero-tolerance policy for any form of assault or discrimination. We're fully cooperating with authorities and will ensure you receive any necessary medical attention or accommodation." "Thank you," James responds, his academic precision returning as shock gives way to practicality. "We're scheduled to continue to San Francisco. I'm presenting at a conference tomorrow." "Of course," Diane nods. "We've already arranged priority boarding for you on the next available flight, which departs in approximately 2 hours. You'll be upgraded to first class, and all remaining legs of your journey will be upgraded as well." As the airline representative continues outlining the accommodations being offered, Marcus completes his statement. Officer Bennett returns his phone. "Thank you for this evidence, Mr. Reed. It'll be extremely helpful for the prosecution. Are you continuing to San Francisco as well?" "Yes," Marcus confirms. "My niece's wedding is tomorrow evening." "We'll make sure you're on the same flight," Officer Bennett assures him. "We may have additional questions as the case proceeds." In another room nearby, Richard Cunningham sits across from a detective and an FBI agent, the latter present due to the federal jurisdiction of crimes committed aboard aircraft. His attorney, hastily arranged via phone, is expected to arrive within the hour. The alcohol has largely worn off, leaving him with the dual burdens of a developing hangover and the dawning realization of his situation's severity. "Mr. Cunningham," the FBI agent says, consulting his notes, "multiple witnesses state that you struck a minor during the flight. The evidence, including video recording, supports these statements. Do you understand the seriousness of these charges?" Richard stares at the table. His life, already unraveling before boarding Flight 1287, now lies in shambles around him. The real estate development, the divorce, the financial pressures. All of it collapsing under the weight of one unforgivable moment of rage. "I want to speak to my attorney," he says finally. Back in the interview room with the Williams family, the process of documentation continues. A medical professional has been brought in to examine Zoe's injury, confirming a nasal contusion but fortunately no fracture. Photos are taken for evidence. Forms are signed. The machinery of justice grinds forward with its peculiar blend of compassion and bureaucracy. As they prepare to leave for the departures lounge, James approaches Marcus. "I didn't properly thank you," he says, extending his hand. "Your intervention prevented the situation from becoming worse, and your recording," he glances at Zoe, lowering his voice, "it captured what I suspected but couldn't prove." Marcus shakes James's hand firmly. "No thanks necessary. Some lines should never be crossed." "Still," James persists, "I'd like to buy you a coffee while we wait for our flight." "If you're comfortable with that," Marcus nods. "I'd appreciate the company." As they walk toward the terminal's central concourse, Zoe between them, they present a tableau that draws curious glances from other travelers. A tall black academic, a compact white former Special Forces operator, and a solemn-faced young girl with a bandage across her nose. An unlikely trio formed by circumstance, bound together by an incident that revealed the worst and best of human nature at 37,000 feet. In the airport lounge, over coffee for the men and hot chocolate for Zoe, conversations unfold that begin to fill in the gaps in their respective stories. James explains his work researching childhood trauma and resilience, particularly in communities of color. Marcus shares limited details of his military career and his current transition to civilian life. Zoe, gradually emerging from her shock, asks questions that reveal her sharp intellect and observant nature. "Have you ever had to stop someone from hurting someone else before?" she asks Marcus during a lull in the adult conversation. Marcus considers his answer carefully. "Yes, in different circumstances." "Were you scared?" A small smile crosses Marcus's face. "Being brave doesn't mean you're not scared, Zoe. It means you do what's right even when you are scared." Zoe absorbs this, turning the concept over in her mind. "I was scared," she admits. "I'm still kind of scared." "That's completely normal," James assures her. "What happened was scary." "But you know what I noticed," Marcus says to Zoe. "After it happened, you didn't fall apart. You stayed calm. You answered questions clearly. That's a kind of bravery, too." This perspective, her behavior framed as strength rather than simply victimhood, visibly shifts something in Zoe's demeanor. She sits straighter, her eyes more focused. As their conversation continues, we begin to see the first threads of an unexpected connection forming. A mentor recognizing potential resilience, a father appreciating another man's positive influence on his daughter, a child finding a new model of strength and integrity. What none of them realizes yet is how their paths have been permanently altered by the events on Flight 1287. The ripples from Richard Cunningham's act of violence will continue spreading, touching lives far beyond the aircraft cabin, challenging assumptions, and ultimately revealing truths about justice and humanity that will transform them all. If you're as invested in these characters' journeys as we are, please subscribe now and comment below about where you're watching from. The next part of this extraordinary story reveals shocking information about Richard Cunningham that will change everything you thought you knew about what really happened on that flight. The Denver International Airport buzzes with the particular energy unique to travel hubs, a blend of exhaustion, anticipation, reunions, and departures. For most passengers streaming through its vast terminals, it's merely a waypoint. For those from United Flight 1287, it has become an unexpected stage where a drama of justice and perception continues to unfold. If you've been captivated by this extraordinary story of courage and confrontation at 37,000 feet, please take a moment to subscribe and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. The revelations that follow will challenge everything you thought you knew about perception, prejudice, and the unexpected connections that form in moments of crisis. In a private airport security office, Richard Cunningham sits alone with his thoughts. The handcuffs have been removed, but freedom remains elusive. His attorney, summoned via a single frantic phone call, is still navigating Denver traffic. The gravity of his situation, assault on a minor, interference with a flight crew, and now the potential hate crime enhancement, settles over him like a physical weight. Through the office's small window, he watches planes take off and land with methodical precision. Just hours ago, he was simply another business traveler, admittedly frustrated and overserved, but still within the boundaries of ordinary life. Now he sits at the epicenter of what will likely become a viral news story, his name and face about to be broadcast to millions. The personal and professional repercussions stretch before him like an endless runway. A knock at the door interrupts his spiral of self-pity. Detective Lynn Martinez enters, her expression professionally neutral as she sets a paper cup of water before him. "Your attorney called," she informs him. Traffic on I-70. He'll be another 30 minutes. Richard reaches for the water, noticing the tremor in his hand. The alcohol has cleared his system enough for fear to take its place. What happens now? He asks, his earlier belligerence deflated. Now we wait, Detective Martinez says simply. Then we'll formally process the charges. Given the circumstances, I expect the DA will oppose any bail request. No bail? The words escape Richard as a whisper. But I have commitments, business obligations. You should have considered that before assaulting a child on a commercial flight, Mr. Cunningham. The detective's voice remains even, but her eyes convey the judgment her professional demeanor restrains. Especially given what was captured in the video. Richard frowns. What video? A passenger recorded the incident, she explains, including some statements you made that support the hate crime enhancement. The blood drains from Richard's face as fragments of memory return, words muttered under his breath, thoughts never meant to be spoken aloud or recorded. Words he'd heard in his childhood from his father, language he'd consciously tried to purge from his vocabulary during his professional ascent, but which apparently still lurked in the darker corners of his mind, emerging when inhibitions dissolved. That's not who I am, he says weakly. Detective Martinez neither confirms nor contradicts his statement. Your attorney will review the evidence with you, she says, moving toward the door. I suggest you be completely honest with him. As she exits, Richard stares at his reflection in the window glass, a disheveled, aging man he barely recognizes. Behind the reflection, planes continue their precise choreography of departure and arrival, the world proceeding with indifferent efficiency despite his personal cataclysm. In another section of the airport, the United Airlines Premium Lounge has been partially cordoned off to provide privacy for the Williams family and key witnesses. Airline representatives move with the heightened attentiveness that potential liability inspires, offering food, beverages, and assurances that the connection to San Francisco is being prioritized. James Williams speaks quietly on his phone, updating conference organizers about his delayed arrival while maintaining a protective watch over Zoe. His daughter sits nearby, her attention focused on a tablet where she's alternating between drawing in a digital art program and texting with her mother, who is currently at a medical conference in Boston and frantically arranging to fly to San Francisco to meet them. Marcus Reed sits several seats away, providing space while remaining present. He observes the lounge with habitual vigilance, noting exits, cataloging other occupants, maintaining awareness of movement patterns. Old habits from deployments where such awareness meant survival. Near the lounge entrance, Officers Bennett and Ramirez confer with airline security and an FBI agent who has joined the investigation due to the federal jurisdiction of crimes committed aboard aircraft. The presence of law enforcement creates a subtle ripple effect through the lounge, with other travelers casting curious glances toward the cordon section, sensing the aftermath of something significant. Dorothy, Marcus's elderly seatmate from the flight, approaches his table with remarkable directness for a woman of her years. Mind if I join you, Commander? Marcus gestures to the empty chair opposite him. Not at all, and it was Lieutenant Commander technically. Dorothy settles herself with a soft grunt, placing her handbag precisely beside her chair, a habit from decades when purse snatching was a prevalent concern in American cities. They've asked me to give a statement, she explains. Apparently, I had an unobstructed view of the altercation. Her fingers form quotation marks in the air, a gesture popularized in her generation. You did, Marcus confirms. Damned right I did, Dorothy says with unexpected heat. Been flying since they still served real meals on real china and economy, seen plenty of badly behaved children and even worse adults. But I've never, she pauses, composing herself. That poor child did nothing to deserve what happened. Marcus studies her, noting the emotion beneath her composed exterior. You mentioned your husband served in Korea. Dorothy nods, absently touching her wedding band, still present though Harold has been gone for 11 years. 3rd Infantry Division, Chasin Reservoir. The names hold the weight of history, of sacrifices understood by those who have worn the uniform but often overlooked in civilian narratives. Tough outfit, tough fight, Marcus acknowledges with respect. He came home changed, Dorothy continues. As I suspect you did too, but he never lost his sense of what's right. She glances toward Zoe. Harold was from rural Georgia, born in 1929, had some perspectives from his upbringing that took time to evolve, but he would have been the first one out of his seat if he'd witnessed what happened today. The conversation is interrupted as Officer Bennett approaches. Mrs. Whitaker, we're ready for your statement now. Dorothy rises with dignity, smoothing her slacks, a brand she's worn since the 1980s from a department store chain that has since vanished from American malls. Young man, she says to Marcus before leaving. Whatever you whispered to that awful man when you intervened, I hope it was appropriately terrifying. A ghost of a smile crosses Marcus's face. Just a professional observation about his situation, ma'am. Dorothy nods approvingly before following Officer Bennett. As she departs, James approaches with 2 fresh coffees, offering one to Marcus. Mind some company? He asks. Please, Marcus gestures to the chair Dorothy vacated. James sits, his long frame adjusting to the lounge furniture. Zoe's mother is trying to get a flight from Boston to San Francisco. Conference season makes for complicated family logistics. Your wife is a doctor as well, Marcus asks. Neurosurgeon, James confirms with evident pride. We met in undergrad at Howard. She followed the medical track while I went into research psychology. We joke that between us, we've got the human brain covered from both hardware and software perspectives. The easy reference to one of America's most prestigious historically black universities carries cultural significance that doesn't require elaboration between them. It establishes another dimension of James's identity, his position as a highly educated professional balancing excellence in a predominantly white field while maintaining connection to African American institutions and heritage. Your work focuses on childhood trauma? Marcus asks, recalling James's earlier mention. James nods. Specifically resilience factors in communities experiencing systemic stressors. Why some children thrive despite adverse circumstances while others struggle. His gaze drifts to Zoe. The academic interest became considerably more personal when we became parents. The unspoken reality hangs between them. The additional layer of preparation black parents must provide their children, the conversations about perception and prejudice that begin far earlier than many imagine. Your daughter seems remarkably composed, Marcus observes. A complex expression crosses James's face, pride mingled with sadness. Zoe has always been emotionally intelligent beyond her years, but this isn't her first encounter with, he pauses, selecting his words carefully, with the harsher realities. Before Marcus can respond, Officer Ramirez approaches their table, accompanied by the FBI agent. Dr. Williams, Mr. Reed, Ramirez begins. This is Special Agent Cardenas from the FBI. He's taking lead on the federal aspects of this case. Agent Cardenas, mid-40s with the trim efficiency of career law enforcement, nods respectfully. Thank you both for your cooperation. We've reviewed the evidence, including Mr. Reed's video recording and statements from multiple witnesses. The local DA's office is proceeding with assault charges, and we're adding federal charges for interference with flight crew members and disruption of commercial aircraft operation. And the hate crime enhancement? James asks directly. Based on Mr. Reed's recording, yes, Agent Cardenas confirms. The audio clearly captures statements that demonstrate bias as a motivating factor in the assault. James absorbs this with a measured nod. Marcus notes the precise control in his reaction, the scholar's discipline channeling what must be a storm of emotion into focused inquiry. What happens now? James asks. Mr. Cunningham will be processed here in Denver, Agent Cardenas explains. Given the nature of the charges and the flight risk, he'll likely remain in custody pending arraignment. We'll need you and your daughter to provide formal statements, which can be done either here or upon your arrival in San Francisco, whichever is less disruptive to your schedule. I'd prefer San Francisco, James decides. Zoe has been through enough today. I want to get her to our destination and settled. Understood, Agent Cardenas agrees. We have offices there that can accommodate the interviews. Mr. Reed, since you're also continuing to San Francisco, would the same arrangement work for you? Marcus nods. Yes, that's fine. There's one more thing, Agent Cardenas adds, his tone shifting slightly. The video Mr. Reed provided has been entered into evidence, but there's a possibility it may become public as the case proceeds. Given that it involves a minor, we'll certainly request restrictions, but in today's digital environment. The implication hangs in the air, the potential for the incident to become viral content, for Zoe to be identified and exposed to public scrutiny during a vulnerable moment. James's expression darkens. Is there anything we can do to prevent that? Limited options legally, Agent Cardenas admits, but we'll do everything possible to protect your daughter's privacy. As the law enforcement officers move on to speak with other witnesses, James turns to Marcus. I hadn't considered the social media dimension. It's unfortunately inevitable these days, Marcus acknowledges. Everything becomes content. James watches Zoe across the lounge, still absorbed in her tablet. She's already dealing with some challenges at school. Last thing she needs is to become some viral hashtag moment. Marcus follows his gaze. Mind if I ask what kind of challenges? A weary sigh escapes James. The usual, I suppose. She's often the only black girl in her advanced classes. There's been some exclusion, comments about her hair, her interests, nothing as overt as what happened today, but a constant low-grade undermining of belonging. The admission carries the weight of generational experience, difficulties recognized across decades, though their manifestations evolve with time. From separate but equal to insidious microaggressions, the packaging changes while the core poison remains. I went to 8 different schools growing up, Marcus offers unexpectedly. Military family, constant relocations, always the new kid, always having to prove myself. Different circumstance, but I remember that feeling of being perpetually assessed rather than accepted. The shared vulnerability, however different in context, creates a moment of connection between the two men. Their conversation is interrupted as a United Airlines representative approaches. "Dr. Williams, Mr. Reed," she begins with practiced courtesy. "We've arranged priority boarding for your connecting flight to San Francisco. It begins boarding in approximately 40 minutes from gate B32. We've upgraded you both to first class, and we'll have a representative escort you directly to the gate when you're ready." James thanks her, then checks his watch, still the reliable Timex that has marked the hours of his life through graduate school, his wedding, Zoe's birth, tenure achievement, and now this unexpected detour in Denver. "I should check on Zoe," he says, rising from the table. As James returns to his daughter, Marcus's attention is drawn to a television mounted in the lounge corner. The screen shows a local Denver news broadcast, currently featuring weather and traffic updates. A scrolling banner along the bottom hints at breaking news. Assault on United Airlines flight, coming up after the commercial break. The machinery of media is already in motion, transforming a personal trauma into public consumption. Marcus checks his own phone, finding several missed calls and messages from his sister's family in San Francisco, concerned about his delayed arrival. As he begins to respond, a notification appears, a news alert about an incident aboard United flight diverted to Denver. Across the lounge, 3 other passengers from Flight 1287 huddle together, engaged in animated conversation. Michael Chen, who recorded part of the incident on his phone, gestures emphatically as he speaks with Sofia Rodriguez, the former teacher, and Linda Harmon, who had expressed skepticism about Zoe's innocence. Their conversation, just barely audible from Marcus's position, reveals the fascinating mechanics of human perception, how 3 people witnessing the same event can process it through entirely different filters. "I'm just saying what I saw," Linda insists, her voice carrying the defensive edge of someone whose worldview has been challenged. "That man was clearly intoxicated and out of control, but the girl was fidgeting and moving around the entire flight. My grandchildren know to sit still on airplanes." "With all due respect, Mrs. Harmon," Sophia responds with the measured patience of someone who spent decades managing classroom disputes. "Children fidget. It's developmentally normal. What isn't normal is an adult striking a child for normal childhood behavior." "I'm not defending him hitting her," Linda clarifies quickly. "That was inexcusable. I'm just saying there's context." Michael, who has been typing on his phone throughout this exchange, looks up. "I've got the video right here." There's no ambiguity about what happened. "Are you planning to post that online?" Sophia asks, concern evident in her voice. Michael hesitates. "I hadn't decided yet, but people should see this. It's important." "That child deserves privacy," Sophia argues. "This isn't entertainment." "It's not about entertainment," Michael counters. "It's about accountability. These things keep happening because they stay hidden." Their debate, balancing privacy against transparency, protection against accountability, mirrors larger social conversations happening across America. When does documentation become exploitation? When does shielding become silencing? The questions have no easy answers, particularly when they involve a child. The lounge television transitions from commercial to the news anchor, a polished woman whose expression shifts from weather report cheerfulness to practice solemnity as she introduces the breaking story. We're following developing news from Denver International Airport, where United Airlines Flight 1287 from Chicago to San Francisco was diverted earlier today following what authorities are describing as an assault incident aboard the aircraft. Initial reports suggest a passenger struck a minor during the flight. The passenger has been taken into custody, and federal authorities are now involved. We'll bring you more details as they become available. The report is brief, lacking details or names, professional restraint that will likely evaporate as more information becomes available. Already, the story has begun its journey through the news ecosystem, where it will be shaped and reshaped by editorial decisions, audience engagement metrics, and the relentless demand for content that generates clicks and views. In the airport's security office, Richard Cunningham watches the same news broadcast with mounting horror. His attorney has finally arrived. Bradford Wellington, silver-haired and Ivy League polished, exuding the confidence of someone accustomed to shepherding wealthy clients through legal difficulties. But even Wellington's assured presence cannot entirely mask his concern as he reviews the evidence compiled against his client. "They have video, Richard," Wellington says, his voice low. "With audio, this isn't going to be easily managed." Richard stares at his hands, manicured nails now ragged where he's bitten them in the hours since his detention. "I'm not that person, Brad. You know me. 20 years you've known me. I've never. People rarely are who they appear to be when under extreme stress," Wellington observes without judgment. "The question now is strategy. Your company position, the development project in Chicago, your public profile, all of it is at risk." The mention of his company sends a fresh wave of anxiety through Richard. As Senior Vice President of Development for Pinnacle Properties, his name and face appear in promotional materials, investor presentations, and corporate communications. The company, with its carefully cultivated image of ethical urban development, will waste no time distancing itself from a scandal involving racial bias and violence against a child. "What do we do?" Richard asks, the question emerging as little more than a whisper. Wellington considers for a moment. "First, we address the immediate legal issues. Then we begin reputation management. I'll contact Patricia at Mercury Communications to develop a crisis response strategy." He pauses, choosing his next words carefully. "Richard, I need to know if you have any history of similar incidents or comments, anything that might emerge and complicate our position." The question hangs between them, an invitation to disclosure that might help his defense and a potential trap that could further incriminate him. Richard thinks of comments made in exclusive club lounges after too many drinks, of assumptions vocalized in spaces he considered safe, of the casual prejudices he's tolerated and sometimes echoed throughout his life, believing them separate from his professional persona. "Nothing on record," he finally says, the careful phrasing not lost on his attorney. Wellington nods, neither believing nor disbelieving. "We'll proceed with what we know then. The charges are serious, Richard. This isn't going away quickly or quietly." As Richard absorbs this reality, his phone, returned to him briefly to contact his attorney, buzzes with an incoming call. The screen displays Angela Mobile, his ex-wife likely having seen the news already. "I should take this," he tells Wellington. His attorney nods. "Keep it brief. Just say you're with counsel and we'll call back when appropriate." Richard accepts the call, hearing the familiar voice of the woman who shared 18 years of his life before their acrimonious separation 3 years ago. "Richard, my God, is it true? The news is saying you hit a child on a plane." "Angela, I can't talk right now. I'm with Bradford. It's complicated." "Complicated?" Angela's voice rises with disbelief. "Richard, tell me you didn't actually strike a child." The direct question, delivered in the voice that once knew him more intimately than any other, breaks through his remaining defenses. "I don't know what happened," he admits, his voice cracking. "I was drinking, I was upset about Chicago, everything just escalated." The silence on the other end speaks volumes. When Angela finally responds, her voice has shifted from shock to something harder. "You need help, Richard, real help, not just Bradford making things go away. This has been building for years." "I know," he acknowledges, the words barely audible. "Call me when you can talk properly," Angela says before ending the call. Richard stares at the silent phone, feeling the weight of his ex-wife's assessment. The unraveling she witnessed during their marriage, his increasing stress, the drinking, the outbursts of temper, had culminated in today's public explosion. The carefully constructed facade of Richard Cunningham, successful real estate executive, has finally shattered completely, revealing the fractured man beneath. At Gate B32, passengers for the continuation of Flight 1287 to San Francisco begin gathering. The flight has been redesignated with a new number, symbolically and practically separating it from the incident that forced its diversion. New crew members stand at the gate, having replaced those involved in the original flight who are now providing statements to investigators. James and Zoe Williams are escorted to the gate by airline representatives, given priority boarding, and settled into the spacious first-class cabin. Marcus Reed follows shortly after, nodding respectfully as he takes his assigned seat across the aisle. As other passengers board, their curious glances suggest that word of the incident has spread throughout the terminal. Some recognize Zoe from glimpses of her being escorted through the airport with her bandaged nose. Others have connected Marcus's military bearing with rumors of a passenger who intervened. The modern phenomenon of events transforming into narratives in real time plays out in whispered conversations and surreptitious glances. Zoe, watching this dynamic unfold, leans closer to her father. "People are talking about us," she observes quietly. James puts his arm around her shoulders. Yes, they are. Remember what we've discussed about being seen versus being known, Zoe nods. Being seen is what others think they know about you from looking. Being known is what's real inside you. That's right, James confirms. Those people only see a moment. They don't know your strength, your intelligence, your kindness. They don't know how you won the science fair last year or how you helped Mrs. Garcia with her groceries every Tuesday. They just see this one moment. Across the aisle, Marcus overhears this exchange. The distinction between being seen and being known resonates with his own experience. The assumptions made about him based on his military background, the simplified narratives that strangers construct around fragments of identity they believe they understand. As the aircraft prepares for departure, Dorothy makes her way down the aisle, stopping briefly by Marcus's seat. "They've put us old folks in the back," she says with good-natured complaint. "But I wanted to say goodbye properly. My Harold would have appreciated knowing men like you are still around." Marcus stands respectfully. "It was a pleasure meeting you, Mrs. Whittaker. Safe travels." Dorothy pats his arm, then turns to the Williams family. "You have a remarkable daughter, Dr. Williams. Strong spirit. My prayers are with you both." As Dorothy continues to her seat, a flight attendant approaches the first-class cabin with pre-departure beverages. The normality of the airline ritual, the offered drinks, the safety demonstration soon to follow, the familiar announcements, creates a surreal contrast to the events of hours earlier. The captain's voice comes over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard United Airlines Flight 4892 to San Francisco. We're currently looking at clear skies and an on-time arrival. Our flight time today will be approximately 2 hours and 15 minutes. No mention of the previous flight number or the reason for the aircraft change, a deliberate omission that fails to erase the connection every continuing passenger feels to the original journey and its interrupted narrative. As the plane taxis toward the runway, James glances at his phone one last time before switching to airplane mode. A notification appears, a news alert with the headline, "Passenger arrested after assaulting child on United flight." The story has officially entered the public domain, beginning its journey through news cycles and social media feeds. What was a personal trauma is now becoming a public narrative, shaped by headlines, sound bites, and the insatiable appetite for content that confirms existing worldviews or provokes emotional response. James switches off his phone, turning instead to Zoe, who stares out the window as the aircraft accelerates down the runway. Her reflection in the plexiglass shows an expression older than her 11 years. Thoughtful, wary processing experiences no child should have to navigate. The plane lifts off, banking gently as it turns westward toward San Francisco. Below, Denver recedes, the city that became an unexpected waypoint in their journey, the place where justice began its complicated process, where consequences were set in motion. In the air once more, the passengers of what was once Flight 1287 continue their interrupted journey. But something has fundamentally changed. Connections have formed that would never have existed otherwise. Perspectives have shifted through shared experience. And for the Williams family and Marcus Reed, the true impact of this day's events is only beginning to unfold. If you've been moved by this story of courage, justice, and unexpected connection, please subscribe now and share in the comments where you're watching from. The next chapter reveals Richard Cunningham's shocking connection to a major media company and how it threatens to distort the truth about what really happened on that flight. In Denver's downtown detention center, Richard Cunningham makes one final call before being processed into the system. This call isn't to his attorney or his ex-wife, but to a number few would recognize: direct access to Edwin Morgenstern, CEO of Global Media Networks, the third largest media conglomerate in the country and a major investor in Pinnacle Properties. "Edwin, it's Richard Cunningham. I'm in trouble and I need help." The response from the media executive is measured, calculating. "I've seen the initial reports, Richard. This is unfortunate timing with the Chicago development announcement next week." "I know," Richard acknowledges, "but there's more to the story than what's being reported. The situation was provoked. I've been set up." The lie forms easily, desperation overriding integrity. On the other end of the line, Edwin Morgenstern considers the implications for the business relationship, for the media narrative, for the competing interests of truth and profitability. "Let me see what we can do," Morgenstern finally says. "Our news division maintains editorial independence, of course, but perhaps we can ensure the coverage is comprehensive." As Richard ends the call, a machinery beyond the legal system begins to activate, the powerful apparatus of media influence that can shape public perception, reframe narratives, and transform victims into provocateurs with surgical precision. The story of Flight 1287 is about to become something more complex and dangerous than a simple case of assault. What no one yet realizes, not Richard in his desperate manipulation, not James in his protective concern for Zoe, not even Marcus with his tactical awareness, is that the incident has created connections that will ultimately prove more powerful than any attempt to control the narrative. The truth of what happened at 37,000 feet will face its greatest challenges on the ground, where power, privilege, and perception battle for supremacy in the court of public opinion. And at the center of it all remains Zoe Williams, a child whose dignity in the face of hatred will ultimately reveal more about courage and character than all the manufactured narratives combined. The sun begins its descent toward the Pacific as United Airlines Flight 4892, the renamed continuation of Flight 1287, approaches San Francisco International Airport. The Golden Gate Bridge emerges from the distance, its iconic orange red spans catching the late afternoon light. For many passengers, this view signals the journey's end, a return to routine. For others, it marks the beginning of something unexpected. In first class, Zoe Williams presses her forehead against the window, watching the landscape below transform from rugged mountains to suburban developments to the dense urban grid of the Bay Area. Her reflection in the plexiglass shows a girl suspended between childhood and something else, innocence confronted by harsh reality, forcing premature wisdom. James Williams reviews his conference notes one final time, though his focus repeatedly drifts to his daughter. Presentation on childhood resilience factors, scheduled for tomorrow morning, now carries personal weight he hadn't anticipated when preparing his research. Theory has collided with lived experience in the most immediate way. Across the aisle, Marcus Reed maintains his habitual alertness, even as fatigue from the day's events settles over him. He notices the subtle changes in Zoe's demeanor throughout the flight, moments of childlike wonder at the view alternating with periods of withdrawal and reflection. Her resilience impresses him, reminding him of his niece Jasmine at a similar age, navigating her own encounters with the world's harsher realities. The captain's voice interrupts these reflections. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've begun our initial descent into San Francisco International Airport. The local time is 5:47 p.m. and current weather conditions are clear with temperatures around 68 degrees. Flight attendants, please prepare the cabin for arrival." The ordinary announcement, the kind passengers typically half listen to while gathering belongings and preparing for landing, serves as a reminder that normal life continues despite the extraordinary events that have connected these particular travelers. The world below remains largely unaware of what transpired at 37,000 feet, though that will soon change as the story spreads through news outlets and social media. As the aircraft begins its descent, James leans toward his daughter. "Your mom's flight gets in around 9. She'll meet us at the hotel." Zoe nods, still looking out the window. "Is she mad about what happened?" The question carries layers of meaning that James immediately recognizes, the concern that she somehow bears responsibility for the disruption, the assault, the aftermath. It's a pattern he's observed in his research with traumatized children, this tendency to internalize blame for events beyond their control. "No, baby girl," he says firmly. "She's concerned about you, angry at the man who hurt you, but not mad about anything you did. None of this was your fault." Zoe considers this, then asks the question that has been forming since Denver. "What will happen to that man?" It's a complex inquiry, part curiosity about consequences, part seeking reassurance that justice exists, part attempting to process the incomprehensible reality that an adult would strike a child over nothing. "He'll face legal consequences," James explains carefully. "Assault charges at minimum, possibly federal charges because it happened on an airplane, and with the evidence that Mr. Reed provided, likely additional charges related to racial bias." Zoe absorbs this information, her analytical mind, already showing the academic inclinations that both her parents possess, processing the procedural elements. "Will I have to see him again? In court or something?" "Possibly," James acknowledges, never one to shield his daughter from difficult truths. "But if that happens, Mom and I will be right there with you. And based on the evidence, there's a good chance he'll accept a plea agreement rather than go to trial." The aircraft continues its descent, the pressure change causing a slight discomfort in Zoe's injured nose. She winces, adjusting the small bandage the airport medical professional applied in Denver. Marcus, noticing her discomfort, reaches into his carry-on and produces a pack of gum, offering it across the aisle. "The chewing helps with the pressure," he explains. "Old pilot's trick." Zoe accepts with a small smile, the first genuine one since the incident. "Were you a pilot too? I thought you were in the Navy." I wasn't a pilot, Marcus clarifies, but I spent a lot of time in military aircraft, learned a few things about making flights more comfortable. This small interaction, the offered gum, the shared knowledge, the momentary connection, creates a pocket of normalcy amid the day's disruption. For Zoe, it represents a reminder that not all adults pose threats, that kindness exists alongside cruelty in the complex human landscape she's navigating. The aircraft touches down with a gentle bump, tires meeting California tarmac with practiced precision. As it taxis toward the terminal, passengers begin the familiar routine of gathering belongings and checking phones reconnected to cellular service. James's phone immediately buzzes with accumulated notifications, texts from colleagues at the conference, updates from Zoe's mother about her connecting flight from Boston, and news alerts referencing the incident on Flight 1287. The digital ripples of the event have begun spreading, the narrative taking shape in absentia. Dr. Williams, a flight attendant approaches as the aircraft reaches the gate. The captain has asked that you and your daughter remain seated until other passengers have deplaned. There's a representative from the airline waiting to escort you through the terminal. James nods, understanding the implications. News travels fast in the digital age, and the airline is attempting to provide some buffer against potential media interest. Thank you, he says. Is there a private exit available? We'll use the service corridors where possible, the flight attendant assures him. The representative will explain everything. Marcus, overhearing this exchange, gathers his limited belongings. As other passengers begin to file out of the aircraft, he remains seated, a deliberate choice that doesn't go unnoticed by James. You don't need to wait with us, James offers. I'm sure your family is expecting you, Marcus shrugs. The wedding rehearsal doesn't start until tomorrow. A few more minutes won't make a difference. The unspoken solidarity in this simple decision, to remain present rather than proceed with his own journey, carries weight beyond the words exchanged. It's a continuation of the protective stance Marcus took during the flight, now extended into this transitional moment. As the last regular passengers deplane, a United Airlines representative enters. A woman in her late 40s with the polished efficiency of someone accustomed to managing difficult situations. Dr. Williams, Ms. Williams, she begins. I'm Monica Alvarez, Customer Care Director for United at SFO. We've arranged for you to exit through our employee access points to avoid the main terminal. There's a private lounge where you can wait for your connecting ground transportation, and we've arranged a car service to your hotel if needed. James expresses appreciation for these arrangements, then gestures toward Marcus. This is Mr. Reed. He was instrumental in addressing the situation on the flight and has provided key evidence to the authorities. Monica nods respectfully to Marcus. Of course, Mr. Reed, we can extend the same courtesy to you if you'd prefer to avoid the main terminal. I appreciate that, Marcus responds, though I'll need to collect checked luggage. We can have that brought to the lounge, Monica assures him. If you're both ready, we'll proceed now. As they gather their belongings and follow Monica from the aircraft, the reality of their situation becomes apparent. Through the jet bridge windows, they can see several news vans parked near the terminal entrance, satellite dishes extended. Word has spread faster than anticipated. Small group is directed through a service door before reaching the main terminal, entering the behind-the-scenes world of airport operations. Utilitarian corridors with exposed pipes and industrial flooring, a stark contrast to the polished public spaces designed for passenger comfort. I apologize for the route, Monica says as they navigate the back passageways. But we've had inquiries from several news outlets already. The story appears to be gaining traction. James's expression tightens with concern. How much information has been released? The official airline statement confirmed only that a passenger was removed from Flight 1287 following an incident and that the matter has been referred to law enforcement, Monica explains. No names or specific details were included. However, passenger social media posts have been more detailed. This confirmation of what James already suspected, that the digital narrative is forming beyond their control, lands heavily. As a researcher accustomed to carefully managing information, the unpredictable spread of his daughter's traumatic experience represents a secondary violation. They reach a discreet doorway marked "Authorized Personnel Only," which Monica opens to reveal a well-appointed lounge typically reserved for airline executives and VIP situations. Please make yourselves comfortable, she offers. There's a private bathroom if you'd like to freshen up, and I can have meals brought in if you're hungry. Mr. Reed, I'll arrange for your luggage to be delivered here. Dr. Williams, did you have checked baggage as well? As these practical arrangements are confirmed, Monica's phone buzzes. She checks the screen, her professional composure momentarily slipping. "Excuse me for one moment," she says, stepping aside to take the call. In the brief privacy this affords, James turns to Marcus. "I want to thank you again, not just for intervening on the flight, but for your continued presence." "It's meant a lot to Zoe." Marcus nods, uncomfortable with explicit gratitude despite having earned it. "Anyone would have done the same." "No," James says firmly. "They wouldn't. That's precisely the point. Most of that plane sat frozen until you moved." This assessment, accurate but unvarnished, acknowledges the reality of bystander behavior that Marcus has observed throughout his career. In crisis situations, decisive action typically comes from the few rather than the many, regardless of how obvious the moral imperative might seem in retrospect. Monica returns, her expression carefully neutral but with an underlying tension that both men immediately register. "I'm afraid there's been a development," she begins cautiously, conscious of Zoe's presence. "A partial video of the incident has been posted online and is gaining significant traction. It appears to have been recorded by another passenger." "Michael Chen," James concludes, recalling the businessman with the phone. Monica nods. "The video doesn't show the full context or the assault itself, but it includes the aftermath and some of the statements made. It's already been shared several thousand times across platforms." The implications of this development settle over them: the loss of control over narrative, the potential for misinterpretation without context, the exposure of Zoe to public scrutiny during a vulnerable moment. "Is there any way to have it removed?" James asks, though his tone suggests he already knows the answer. "Our legal team is exploring options," Monica responds diplomatically. "But once something enters the digital ecosystem," she doesn't need to complete the thought. The reality of modern information spread, its speed, its reach, its resistance to containment, is understood by all present. Marcus, whose security work has included digital threat assessment, recognizes the potential ramifications more acutely than most. "Has it been picked up by any major news outlets yet?" "Not the video specifically," Monica confirms. "But several national outlets have now reported on the incident, and local stations in both Chicago and San Francisco have it as breaking news." As if to underscore this point, a television mounted in the lounge corner, previously muted, now shows a split-screen image of Denver International Airport and San Francisco International Airport, with a news ticker referencing "Assault on United Flight." James instinctively moves to position himself between the screen and Zoe, but his daughter has already seen it. Her expression reflects not surprise but resignation, the weary recognition that her private trauma has become public consumption. "I'm going to be on TV, aren't I?" she asks quietly. Before James can respond, Marcus interjects with unexpected directness. "Not if we can help it, and if it happens anyway, you'll get through it. Your story doesn't belong to them." The statement, simple but emphatic, offers validation that Zoe visibly responds to, straightening slightly in her seat. The acknowledgement of her agency, her ownership of her own experience, provides a framework for processing what's happening around her. The lounge door opens, and an airline staff member enters with Marcus's checked bag. As this exchange occurs, James's phone rings, his wife calling from her connecting flight in Chicago. "Andrea," he answers, moving slightly away for privacy. "Yes, we've landed safely. We're in a private lounge at the airport." He pauses, listening. "Yes, the news is spreading. A video has been posted online." Another pause. "She's doing remarkably well, all things considered, physically just bruising and minor swelling." He listens again, longer this time. "I understand. Yes, we'll wait for you at the hotel. Love you too." As James rejoins them, Monica approaches with another update. "Your car service is ready whenever you are." We can exit through the service area directly to the parking structure, avoiding the main terminal completely. James nods appreciatively. "I think we're ready now. Zoe's mother will meet us at the hotel later tonight." As they prepare to depart, Marcus collects his luggage. "I should let you folks get settled. My hotel is downtown near Union Square." "Where's the wedding being held?" James inquires. "Presidio Chapel," Marcus responds. "My niece wanted a military connection since her father served as well before he passed." James nods in understanding, then makes a decision. "Our hotel is near Union Square as well, the Grand Hyatt. Perhaps we could share the car service, unless you have other arrangements." The invitation, extending their connection beyond the confines of the crisis that formed it, represents a choice to maintain the human bond forged through extraordinary circumstances. Marcus considers briefly, then accepts with a nod. "That would be appreciated." As they follow Monica through another series of back corridors toward the parking structure, Zoe walks between the two men, her physical positioning a visual representation of the protective circle that has formed around her. Despite the traumatic catalyst for this arrangement, there's a fundamental security in it that allows her to stand straighter, her innate resilience bolstered by tangible support. The black SUV waiting in the parking structure bears no markings identifying it as airline-affiliated transportation, another thoughtful detail in the protective protocol. As they settle into the vehicle, the driver confirms their destinations and pulls away from the curb, navigating toward the airport exit. Inside the climate-controlled quiet of the SUV, separated from the bustling airport and the news vans stationed outside, a moment of relative calm descends. The physical distance from the site of trauma, now thousands of miles behind them, allows for the beginning of processing, of transitioning from reactive mode to reflective understanding. Zoe stares out the window as San Francisco unfolds before them, the colorful Victorian houses climbing impossibly steep hills, the glimpses of bay water between buildings, the iconic Transamerica pyramid punctuating the skyline. The vibrant normality of the city stands in stark contrast to the extraordinary events that have brought them here under these circumstances. James observes his daughter closely, attuned to the subtle indicators of her emotional state. As a researcher specializing in childhood trauma and resilience, he recognizes the complex processing occurring beneath her outward composure. The initial shock has faded, giving way to the cognitive and emotional work of integration, fitting this experience into her understanding of the world and herself within it. Marcus, with the situational awareness that defined his military career, maintains vigilance even in this seemingly secure moment. He notes the driver's professional focus, the vehicle's route avoiding major traffic arteries, the tinted windows providing privacy. The habits of protection once formed are not easily set aside. As they approach the downtown area, the SUV's built-in television screen activates automatically, displaying local news and information for visitors. Before the driver can deactivate it, the screen shows a news anchor reporting live from San Francisco International Airport. We're continuing to follow the developing story of an alleged assault aboard United Airlines Flight 1287 from Chicago to San Francisco, which was diverted to Denver earlier today. Sources confirm that a male passenger was taken into custody after allegedly striking a minor during the flight. We're now learning that the passenger has been identified as Richard Cunningham, Senior Vice President of Development for Pinnacle Properties, a major real estate firm with projects throughout the Midwest. The anchor continues as a professional photograph of Richard appears on screen, Richard in a tailored suit with a confident smile, the corporate headshot presenting a stark contrast to the disheveled, angry man from the aircraft. Mr. Cunningham's attorney has released a statement describing the incident as a significant misunderstanding that has been taken out of context. The statement goes on to suggest that Mr. Cunningham was responding to repeated provocation and acted defensively, not aggressively. The narrative pivot, from unambiguous assault to contested interpretation, lands like a physical blow. James stiffens, his expression hardening as the anchor continues. Global Media Networks, which has a substantial investment stake in Pinnacle Properties, reported through its affiliate stations that witnesses described the incident as more complicated than initially portrayed, with some passengers indicating that the minor involved had been disruptive throughout the flight. "Turn it off," James says sharply to the driver, who immediately complies. The silence that follows feels weighted, dense with implication. The stark reality of privilege and power dynamics in shaping public narrative has emerged more quickly and blatantly than any of them anticipated. Marcus breaks the silence first. "Global Media Networks, the third largest media conglomerate in the country." James nods grimly. "With television stations in 63 markets, 3 cable news channels, and digital platforms reaching approximately 40% of American adults daily." The clinical precision of this assessment, like something from a media studies lecture, barely contains the anger beneath it. The implications are clear. Richard Cunningham has connections that extend beyond legal representation, connections that can shape how millions of people will perceive what happened on that flight. Zoe, who has been listening with the careful attention of a child accustomed to learning through observation, asks the question that cuts to the heart of the matter. "They're saying it was my fault." The rawness of the question, its direct confrontation of injustice, creates a moment of shared outrage between the two men. "No, sweetheart," James answers, his voice gentle despite his anger. "They're trying to protect him by suggesting that, but we have the truth and we have evidence." "Mr. Reed's video," Zoe remembers, Marcus nods, "complete and unedited with clear audio." This reassurance, The existence of objective documentation that contradicts the emerging counter-narrative provides temporary solace. But all three understand, each from their different perspectives and experiences, that truth and perception often travel separate paths in the public sphere. As the SUV navigates through downtown San Francisco toward Union Square, the full complexity of their situation emerges. What began as a discrete incident of assault has expanded into something larger, a case study in how power, privilege, and media influence intersect to shape public understanding of private trauma. The vehicle pulls up to the Grand Hyatt, its modern glass facade reflecting the early evening light. The doorman approaches as the driver opens the passenger door, offering assistance with luggage with no indication that he recognizes them or knows anything about their situation, a small mercy in a day marked by exposure. Marcus collects his bag, then turns to James and Zoe. "My hotel is just 2 blocks from here. I'll walk the rest of the way." James offers his hand. "Thank you again for everything. If you'd be willing, I'd like to get your contact information." "The authorities in San Francisco will need your statement, and I suspect we'll be navigating this situation for some time." The men exchange contact details, the simple act formalizing the connection forged through extraordinary circumstances. As Marcus prepares to depart, Zoe steps forward. "Mr. Reed," she says with the direct gaze that has impressed him throughout their interaction, "will you be okay walking by yourself?" The question, a child expressing concern for an adult's safety, particularly one with his training, catches Marcus off guard. Then he recognizes what it represents. Zoe reasserting her capacity for care and consideration of others, refusing to be defined solely as a victim despite the day's events. "I'll be just fine," he assures her with genuine appreciation for the concern. "Thank you for asking." As Marcus walks away, disappearing into the San Francisco evening, James guides Zoe into the hotel lobby. The marble floors and soaring ceilings create an atmosphere of insulated luxury, a world apart from airplane cabins and airport corridors. The normalcy of check-in procedures, elevator rides, and hotel room exploration provides a welcome structure after hours of disruption and uncertainty. In their suite, James calls room service while Zoe explores the view from their window, San Francisco spread before them, lights beginning to twinkle as dusk descends. The city continues its rhythms, indifferent to their particular drama yet somehow comforting in its constancy. "Daddy," Zoe says, still looking out the window, "what happens now?" The question encompasses far more than immediate plans. It seeks a roadmap for navigating the aftermath, for processing trauma, for reconciling the world as she understood it yesterday with the world as she's experienced it today. James joins her at the window, recognizing the pivotal nature of this moment, how his response will shape her understanding moving forward. "First, we rest and recover. Your mom arrives in a few hours. Tomorrow, I give my presentation at the conference, and you can either come with me or stay here with Mom, whichever feels better." "I want to come with you," Zoe decides immediately. "I want to hear you talk about your research." The choice to engage rather than withdraw, to maintain normalcy despite trauma, speaks to the resilience factors James studies professionally and now witnesses personally in his daughter. "Beyond that," he continues, "we'll give our statements to the authorities here. We'll work with legal professionals to ensure accountability. And we'll process what happened, not just the event itself, but what it means and how we move forward from it." "Will people believe what really happened?" Zoe asks, referencing the already emerging counter-narrative. "Or will they believe what that man's company is saying?" It's a sophisticated question that cuts to the heart of modern information ecosystems, media influence, and the complex relationship between truth and perception, concepts many adults struggle to navigate. "Some people will believe what's easiest or what fits their existing worldview," James acknowledges honestly. "But others will seek out the full story, and the legal system will have access to all the evidence, including Mr. Reed's video." This answer, neither falsely reassuring nor unnecessarily pessimistic, honors Zoe's capacity to handle complexity while providing a framework for understanding the challenges ahead. As they settle into the hotel room, waiting for room service, and for Andrea Williams to join them from her hastily rearranged flight from Boston, the events of Flight 1287 continue to ripple outward through media ecosystems and personal networks. In a downtown San Francisco hotel just blocks away, Marcus Reed calls his sister's family to explain his delayed arrival and the extraordinary circumstances behind it. The conversation connects not just to immediate concerns about his well-being, but to deeper family history, to his sister Sandra's experiences with racial prejudice, to the protective instincts that shaped both siblings' life paths. to the values they committed to passing to the next generation. In Denver, Richard Cunningham remains in custody, his arraignment scheduled for the following morning. His attorney works tirelessly, coordinating with Pinnacle Properties' corporate communications team and with contacts at global media networks. The machinery of reputation management activates, press releases crafted, talking points distributed to affiliated media outlets, strategic leaks planned to shape public perception. In newsrooms across the country, editors and producers make decisions about how to frame the story, which perspectives to highlight, which footage to air, which experts to interview. These choices, multiplied across hundreds of outlets, will collectively shape how millions of Americans understand what happened on Flight 1287. On social media platforms, the partial video recorded by Michael Chen continues to spread, generating comment threads that reflect the nation's deep divisions. Some users express outrage at the assault, others question the context, still others focus on tangential details while missing the fundamental violation at the center. The digital discourse fractures along familiar fault lines of race, politics, and worldview. Back in the Grand Hyatt suite, James receives an email from the conference organizers expressing concern about the incident and offering to reschedule his presentation if needed. The subject line catches Zoe's attention as she passes behind her father's chair. "Don't change your presentation because of me," she says firmly. "Your research is important." James turns to face his daughter, struck once again by her maturity in processing the situation. "Actually," he says thoughtfully, "I'm considering making a small addition to my talk with your permission." "About what happened today?" Zoe asks. James nods, as an illustration of how resilience factors manifest in real time. Not identifying you specifically, of course, but using the experience as a case study in how children process and respond to acute stressors. The proposal, to transform their private trauma into professional insight that might benefit others, represents a potential path toward meaning-making, toward integrating the experience into their ongoing life narrative rather than allowing it to remain an isolated disruption. Zoe considers this with characteristic thoughtfulness. Would it help other kids? Kids who have bad things happen to them. It could, James confirms. It would add a powerful real-world dimension to the research data. Then yes, Zoe decides, you can talk about it. This exchange, a father and daughter collaboratively deciding how to frame and share their experience, represents a reclaiming of agency, a refusal to remain passive recipients of harm or subjects of others' narratives. In this small but significant way, they begin the process of transformation, of converting victimization into meaningful action. As night falls over San Francisco, the various actors in this unfolding drama settle into temporary pause, James and Zoe awaiting Andrea's arrival, Marcus preparing for his niece's wedding weekend, Richard facing a night in detention, media organizations crafting tomorrow's coverage. But the connections formed and broken aboard Flight 1287 have set in motion consequences that will continue to reveal themselves in unexpected ways. The most significant revelation, however, remains to be discovered, a truth about Richard Cunningham that will emerge in the coming days, fundamentally altering how everyone understands what really happened at 37,000 feet and why. This revelation, when it finally surfaces, will transform not just the legal proceedings but the lives of everyone involved, creating unexpected paths toward justice, redemption, and healing that none could have anticipated during those terrifying moments aboard United Airlines Flight 1287. If you've been moved by this extraordinary story of courage, justice, and the power of standing firm in your truth even when powerful forces try to distort it, please subscribe now. In our final chapter, the shocking truth about Richard Cunningham's past will be revealed, changing everything we thought we knew about what happened on that flight. Morning light streams through the windows of the Grand Hyatt suite, illuminating three figures around the breakfast table. James and Andrea Williams sit close together, their academic training momentarily set aside as they focus entirely on their daughter. Zoe, dressed for the day in a crisp blue dress chosen for her father's conference presentation, methodically arranges her scrambled eggs into neat sections on her plate, a self-soothing behavior her parents recognize but don't interrupt. If you've been following this powerful story of injustice, courage, and redemption, please take a moment to subscribe and share in the comments where you're watching from. The final chapter of this extraordinary journey reveals shocking truths and unexpected healing that will stay with you long after the video ends. Andrea Williams, brilliant neurosurgeon, devoted mother, and now fierce protector, reviews the notes she's made since arriving late the previous night. Her medical training evident in her organized approach to the situation, she's compiled a timeline, legal considerations, and medical documentation of Zoe's injuries. The bruising around Zoe's nose has deepened overnight, the discoloration more pronounced against her brown skin. The conference organizers have been incredibly accommodating, James says, referring to the adjusted schedule that will allow him to present his research on childhood resilience factors later this morning. They've arranged additional security as a precaution, though I doubt there will be any issues in that environment. Andrea nods, her expression reflecting the complex calculation parents must make in these situations, balancing protection against the importance of maintaining normalcy. I think it's good for Zoe to see you present, to witness the work that your experiences together have helped shape. This framing, positioning Zoe as a contributor to important research rather than merely a victim of trauma, represents the thoughtful approach both Williams' parents have taken to raising their daughter. They've consistently emphasized her agency, her voice, her capacity to derive meaning from difficulty. "How are you feeling about today, sweetheart?" Andrea asks, reaching across the table to gently touch Zoe's hand. Zoe looks up from her carefully arranged breakfast. "I'm okay. I want to hear Daddy's talk." She pauses, then adds with surprising insight, "I think it will help make yesterday make more sense." This comment, revealing her intuitive understanding of how narrative frameworks help process trauma, causes both parents to exchange a glance of pride mingled with sadness. Their daughter's emotional intelligence continues to impress them, even as they wish she didn't need to apply it to such difficult circumstances. A gentle knock at the door interrupts their breakfast. Andrea rises to answer it, returning moments later with Marcus Reed. His military bearing remains evident despite his civilian clothes, dark jeans and a crisp button-down shirt, a compromise between formality and comfort. "Good morning," he greets them, nodding respectfully to Andrea, whom he met briefly upon her late arrival the previous night. "I hope I'm not interrupting." "Not at all," James assures him, standing to shake his hand. "We were just finishing breakfast before heading to the conference. Please join us." Marcus takes a seat at the table, accepting the coffee Andrea offers. His presence, steady, vigilant, yet unobtrusive, has become a source of comfort to the Williams family in the short time since Flight 1287. His involvement represents a connection to the objective truth of what happened, a counter to the narrative distortion that began emerging through media channels. "I received a call from Agent Cardenas this morning," Marcus informs them, referring to the FBI agent handling the federal aspects of the case. "They'd like to take my formal statement this afternoon. I wanted to check if they've contacted you as well." James nods. "Yes, they've arranged to meet us at the hotel after my presentation. They're sending a female agent who specializes in interviewing minors for Zoe's statement." This consideration, the assignment of an agent with appropriate training for interviewing a child, offers a small reassurance that the system is functioning as it should, that Zoe's well-being is being considered within the procedural requirements. "There have been some developments overnight," Marcus continues, his tone measured. "The partial video that was circulating has been countered by more complete footage that another passenger provided to authorities. And several witnesses have come forward with statements that directly contradict the narrative Cunningham's team was promoting. This news, the first positive shift in the public information landscape since the incident, visibly relieves some tension in both James and Andrea. The power of objective evidence to counter manufactured narratives represents a crucial counterbalance to the media influence that Richard Cunningham's connections initially leveraged. Zoe, who has been listening attentively as always, asks the question that adults might hesitate to voice. "Does that mean people will know the truth now?" Marcus considers her question with the seriousness it deserves. "It means the full evidence will be available to those who want to see it. Some people will still choose to believe what's convenient for them, but the truth has a way of persisting." This answer, honest yet hopeful, seems to satisfy Zoe, who returns to her breakfast with slightly more enthusiasm than before. Andrea turns to Marcus. "Will you be able to attend James's presentation? I know you have your niece's wedding preparations, but having you there would mean a lot to us." The invitation acknowledges the unique bond formed through shared experience, the way Marcus has become part of their story through his intervention and continued support. "Rehearsal isn't until this evening," Marcus confirms. "I'd be honored to attend." As they finish breakfast and prepare to depart for the conference, James's phone buzzes with a news alert. His expression darkens as he reads the screen. "What is it?" Andrea asks, immediately alert to the shift in her husband's demeanor. James shows her the phone. Cunningham's arraignment in Denver. His attorney is arguing that the assault was provoked and that the hate crime enhancement is politically motivated overreach. Andrea's expression hardens, the protective fury of a mother whose child has been harmed and then blamed evident in her eyes. Of course they are. They'll try anything to minimize this. Marcus, who has seen this pattern play out in various contexts throughout his career, offers a measured perspective. Standard defense strategy. Create doubt, shift blame, minimize consequences. With the evidence available, particularly the audio recording where his language clearly indicated bias, they're facing an uphill battle. As they gather their belongings and prepare to leave the hotel suite, another news alert appears on James's phone. This one causes him to stop abruptly, staring at the screen with a mixture of shock and vindication. "What now?" Andrea asks. James hands her the phone wordlessly. She reads aloud. "Breaking. Second assault allegation emerges against Richard Cunningham. Former employee files police report claiming 2019 incident was buried by HR." The implications of this development ripple through the room. The incident on Flight 1287 wasn't an isolated explosion of rage, but potentially part of a pattern of behavior, exactly the kind of contextual information that transforms public understanding of individual actions. "The dam is breaking," Marcus observes quietly. Once one person comes forward, others often find the courage to speak. This insight, drawn from his experience with systemic issues in military and security contexts, highlights the potential turning point this represents. The counter-narrative promoted by Cunningham's corporate connections now faces competition from multiple sources of contradicting evidence. As they make their way through the hotel lobby toward the waiting car that will take them to the conference venue, James notices several guests glancing in their direction, some with expressions of recognition, others with the more subtle attention of people trying not to stare. The story has clearly penetrated public awareness in San Francisco, likely accelerated by local news coverage. The car navigates through morning traffic toward the Moscone Center, where the International Conference on Childhood Development is being held. The familiar routine of conference attendance, badge collection, program consultation, navigation of crowded hallways, provides a welcome structure after the chaos of the previous day. The lecture hall where James will present his research is already half full when they arrive, 30 minutes before his scheduled time. Colleagues approach with expressions of concern and support, having connected the news reports about an incident on a United flight with James's delayed arrival. He accepts their well wishes with grace, but maintains appropriate privacy regarding the details, particularly with Zoe present. The conference organizers have arranged seating near the front for the Williams family and Marcus. As they settle in, Andrea keeps a protective arm around Zoe's shoulders while scanning the room with the alert awareness of someone anticipating potential threats. Marcus, seated on Zoe's other side, maintains similar vigilance, though his military training makes his surveillance less obvious. The session chair, Dr. Alina Chen from UCLA, approaches their row. "Dr. Williams, we're so glad you could make it despite yesterday's difficulties. We've adjusted the schedule to give you the full time for your presentation, and we've arranged for questions to be submitted in writing rather than open microphone format, given the circumstances. These thoughtful accommodations, small adjustments to standard academic procedures that acknowledge the extraordinary situation, reflect the compassionate professional community that has sustained James throughout his career." "Thank you, Alina," James responds with genuine appreciation. "I've made some minor modifications to my presentation, with my family's permission, to incorporate recent experience as a case study. I believe it will enhance the research findings considerably." Dr. Chen nods understanding. "I have no doubt. Your work on resilience factors has always been strengthened by your willingness to connect theory with lived experience." As the session begins and the room fills to capacity, Zoe sits straighter in her seat, her expression shifting from apprehension to interest. The academic environment, familiar to her from her parents' careers but still impressive in its formality, provides a powerful contrast to the chaos of the previous day. Here, ideas are exchanged with respect, disagreements are expressed through civilized discourse, evidence supports conclusions. The session chair introduces James with a brief overview of his research credentials and publications. As he rises and moves to the podium, he catches Zoe's eye, offering a small smile that communicates volumes between father and daughter. Then, with the practiced composure of an experienced academic, he begins his presentation on resilience factors in children facing systemic stressors. The capacity of children to withstand adverse experiences, he begins, is not merely a function of individual temperament or family support, though these are crucial components. Our research increasingly points to the significance of narrative frameworks, the stories children construct or are given to understand their experiences, particularly experiences of injustice or trauma. The slides behind him display data from his longitudinal studies, graphs showing correlations between various support factors and positive outcomes. But it's when he transitions to the unplanned addition that the presentation takes on extraordinary power. Theory and data provide essential foundations, he acknowledges, but sometimes circumstances offer unexpected opportunities to observe these principles in immediate application. With my family's permission, I'd like to share a case study that developed quite literally in transit to this conference. Without identifying Zoe specifically, James outlines the incident on Flight 1287, the unprovoked aggression, the racial component, the intervention by a trained professional, the subsequent attempts to distort the narrative through media connections. He connects each element to his research findings, highlighting how the provision of accurate information, agency in decision-making, and supportive community create pathways for children to process trauma without being defined by it. In the audience, Zoe listens with fierce attention, seeing her own experience transformed into something larger, a contribution to understanding that might ultimately help other children. This reframing, this extraction of meaning from suffering, represents precisely the resilience-building mechanism that James's research has identified as crucial for positive outcomes. Marcus, observing this dynamic between father and daughter, recognizes something familiar from his military experience: the power of purpose to transform trauma, the way that serving something larger than oneself creates pathways through pain. In his years working with veterans struggling with PTSD, he's seen how narrative framing can mean the difference between being crushed by experience and growing through it. As James concludes his presentation, the audience response is powerful, not the polite academic applause of typical conference sessions, but a deeper recognition of witnessing something authentic and significant. Several colleagues are visibly moved, connecting the scholarly insights to the human reality sitting in the front row. The session chair manages the written questions with sensitivity, filtering out anything that might be intrusive while allowing James to elaborate on the research implications. Throughout this exchange, Zoe remains engaged, occasionally whispering observations to her mother or Marcus, her analytical mind processing how her father translates lived experience into scholarly frameworks. After the session concludes, colleagues approach with expressions of support and interest, many of them parents themselves who recognize the extraordinary nature of the situation. James navigates these interactions with professional grace while maintaining protective boundaries around his family. As they prepare to leave the conference center for their appointment with FBI agents, James's phone buzzes again with a news alert. The frequency of these notifications since yesterday reflects how thoroughly their private experience has entered public discourse. This alert, however, contains information that stops him cold. He reads it twice before showing it to Andrea and Marcus, angling the screen away from Zoe's view. The headline reads, "Breaking! Court records reveal Richard Cunningham previously arrested for domestic violence. Ex-wife comes forward." The subheading elaborates, 2018 charges were dismissed following completion of anger management program. Ex-wife Angela Cunningham now speaking out following United Airlines incident. This revelation, concrete evidence of a pattern of behavior rather than an isolated incident, transforms the narrative completely. What Cunningham's media connections have attempted to frame as a misunderstanding or overreaction now appears as part of a documented history of violence, particularly when feeling challenged or disrespected. "This changes everything," Andrea whispers, conscious of Zoe nearby speaking with one of her father's colleagues. "It completely undermines their provocation defense." Marcus nods agreement. Pattern evidence is powerful in these cases. The prosecution will move to have it admitted as relevant to state of mind and intent. As they exit the conference center and enter their waiting car, James makes a difficult decision. Zoe needs to know about this development, at least in basic terms. We've always been straightforward with her about difficult realities. Andrea considers this, then nods agreement. Age-appropriate transparency has always been our approach, and she'll likely hear about it anyway as the story continues to develop. In the privacy of the car, James gently broaches the subject. "Zoe, there's been some news about the man from the airplane that I think you should know about. It appears this wasn't the first time he's hurt someone when he was angry. His ex-wife has come forward to say he was violent toward her in the past as well. Zoe absorbs this information with the thoughtful seriousness that continues to impress the adults around her. So it really wasn't about me at all, she concludes. He's just someone who hurts people when he's mad. The insight, cutting through adult complications to the essential truth, demonstrates her developing capacity to contextualize her experience, to recognize that the assault reflected the assailant's pathology rather than anything about her. That's exactly right, Andrea confirms, squeezing her daughter's hand. His actions reflect his problems, not anything about you. This framing, a core principle in both James's research and Andrea's medical approach to patient wellness, provides Zoe with a protective cognitive framework, a way to process the experience without internalizing harm to her self-concept. At the FBI field office in San Francisco, the Williams family and Marcus are ushered into separate interview rooms for their formal statements. Agent Cardenas, who has flown in from Denver to maintain continuity in the investigation, coordinates the process with professional efficiency. Zoe's interview is conducted by Special Agent Melissa Takeda, whose specialized training in working with minor witnesses is evident in her approach. She creates a comfortable environment, explains the process in age-appropriate terms, and emphasizes that Zoe can take breaks whenever needed. In another room, Marcus provides his detailed account, including context for why he began recording before the assault occurred. In my security work, I'm trained to recognize pre-incident indicators, he explains. Mr. Cunningham's escalating behavior, the aggressive body language, increased volume, territorial displays, presented a textbook pattern of impending physical aggression. This professional assessment, coming from someone with extensive training in threat detection and intervention, provides crucial expert context for the prosecution. It transforms what Cunningham's defense might try to frame as an overreaction into a predictable, preventable outcome that any trained observer would have anticipated. James and Andrea, interviewed together at their request given that they are both Zoe's parents, provide their accounts with the precise, detailed recall that their academic training has instilled. They describe not just the assault itself, but the pattern of behavior leading up to it, the clearly racial component of Cunningham's comments, and the subsequent attempt to shift blame through media connections. When the formal statements are complete, Agent Cardenas brings them together for a final briefing. I want to thank you all for your cooperation and thorough accounts, he begins. With the evidence we've compiled, multiple witness statements, 2 video recordings including Mr. Reed's complete version with audio, and now the emerging pattern evidence from Mr. Cunningham's past, we have an extremely strong case. This assessment, the first official confirmation that the justice system is functioning as it should, provides a measure of relief to the Williams family. The machinery of accountability is in motion, responding to evidence rather than influence. What happens next? Andrea asks, her medical training evident in her preference for clear procedures and timelines. The Denver District Attorney will proceed with state charges of assault on a minor with a hate crime enhancement, Agent Cardenas explains. Concurrently, federal prosecutors will pursue charges related to interference with flight crew members and operation of an aircraft. Mr. Cunningham remains in custody in Denver pending a bail hearing, which his attorney has requested for tomorrow morning. The mention of the bail hearing raises obvious concerns. Is there a possibility he could be released? James asks, the protective father momentarily overtaking the objective researcher. The prosecution will oppose release given the severity of the charges and the emerging pattern of behavior, Agent Cardenas assures them. And with his ex-wife now providing statements about previous violent incidents, his attorney's ability to characterize this as an isolated event has been significantly undermined. As they prepare to leave the FBI office, Agent Cardenas has one final piece of information to share. There's been a development you should be aware of. Global Media Networks, which initially allowed its affiliates to run with the provoked narrative, has issued a clarification statement this morning distancing itself from Mr. Cunningham and Pinnacle Properties. They're citing emerging evidence that contradicts earlier reports. This corporate reversal, the abandonment of Cunningham by his media allies as the evidence mounts, represents a significant shift in the public narrative. The powerful interests that initially attempted to shield him have recalculated their position based on reputational risk. They're cutting him loose, Marcus observes with the detached analysis of someone who has seen similar dynamics in other contexts. The cost of supporting him now outweighs any benefit. The cynicism of this corporate calculation, the abandonment of an ally once he becomes a liability, contrasts sharply with the genuine human connections that have formed through this shared experience. The Williams family and Marcus have remained steadfast in their commitment to truth and mutual support, while institutional allies prove conditional in their loyalty. As they exit the federal building into the San Francisco afternoon, the city continues its normal rhythms around them. Tourists photographing the iconic architecture, business people hurrying between meetings, street performers entertaining crowds at Union Square. The contrast between this ordinary urban life and the extraordinary events they're navigating creates a surreal quality, a reminder that personal cataclysms occur alongside mundane daily routines. "What would you like to do now?" James asks Zoe, deliberately returning decision-making power to his daughter after hours of procedural requirements where others controlled the process. "We have the rest of the afternoon before Mr. Reed needs to attend his niece's rehearsal dinner." Zoe considers the options with characteristic thoughtfulness. "Could we go to the Japanese tea garden? Mom showed me pictures from when you both visited before I was born." The request to connect with her parents' history, to create a new memory in a place of beauty and tranquility, speaks to her intuitive understanding of what she needs after the chaos and ugliness of recent events. It represents not just childlike desire for a pleasant outing, but a sophisticated self-care strategy. "That sounds perfect," Andrea agrees, exchanging a proud glance with James at their daughter's wisdom. Marcus checks his watch. "I have time to join you before I need to prepare for the rehearsal, if that's all right." "Of course," James confirms without hesitation. "You're practically family at this point." The phrase, offered casually but carrying significant meaning, acknowledges how thoroughly Marcus has been incorporated into their experience, how the boundaries between stranger and trusted ally have dissolved through shared crisis and response. In Golden Gate Park, the Japanese tea garden offers a striking counterpoint to the tension and conflict of the past 24 hours. The carefully tended landscape with its arching bridges, gentle waterfalls, and meticulously pruned trees creates an environment of intentional harmony, human design working with natural elements rather than against them. Zoe moves through the garden with increasing animation, her natural childhood curiosity gradually reasserting itself after being temporarily suppressed by trauma. She examines the koi in the ponds, counts the tiers of the pagoda, tests the resonant quality of the drum bridge. Each engagement with beauty and wonder represents another step in reclaiming normal childhood experience. As the adults follow at a slight distance, allowing Zoe space to explore while keeping her in sight, Andrea turns to Marcus. "I haven't had a proper chance to thank you," she says quietly. "Not just for intervening on the flight, but for everything since. Your continued presence has meant more than you probably realize, especially to Zoe." Marcus, uncomfortable with explicit gratitude as many who serve others professionally tend to be, shifts the focus. "Your daughter is extraordinary. Her resilience, her insight, she's going to emerge from this stronger." "Yes," Andrea agrees, watching Zoe photograph a particularly vibrant maple tree with the phone they've allowed her to carry today. "But children shouldn't have to be extraordinary in that way. They shouldn't need to develop resilience against hatred and violence." This fundamental truth, the unfairness that requires some children to develop strengths that others never need, hangs in the air between them. It's the reality that James studies professionally and that both Williams' parents navigate personally as they raise a black daughter in America. It's a reality that Marcus has observed through his sister's experience raising her daughter, his niece Jasmine. "No, they shouldn't," he agrees simply. Then, after a moment's consideration, he adds, "But since some do need to, having parents like you and James makes all the difference. I've seen that in my sister's family, too." This connection, the shared understanding of what it means to prepare children for both the beauty and the brutality of the world they'll navigate, creates another layer of bond between them. As the afternoon progresses, Zoe's energy and engagement continue to increase, her natural resilience supported by the combination of beautiful surroundings, parental presence, and the sense of safety created by Marcus's continued vigilance. The garden becomes not just a tourist destination but a healing space, allowing gradual processing and integration of difficult experience. Eventually, Marcus checks his watch again. "I should head back to prepare for the rehearsal dinner," he says with genuine reluctance. "My sister will be wondering where I am." "Of course," James acknowledges. "Family obligations come first." The Williams family walks with Marcus to the garden exit, Zoe now holding both parents' hands in a gesture that balances childlike connection with growing independence. At the gate, she releases their hands and steps toward Marcus. "Thank you for helping us," she says with the direct sincerity that has characterized her throughout their interaction. "And thank you for showing me what brave looks like." The statement, simple but profound in its recognition of moral courage, visibly moves Marcus, breaking through his practiced composure. He crouches slightly to meet Zoe at eye level, respecting her as an individual rather than speaking down to her as a child. "Thank you for showing me what brave looks like too," he responds with equal sincerity. Standing strong after someone hurts you takes just as much courage as stepping into a conflict. This validation, the recognition of her own strength rather than just her vulnerability, completes a circle of affirmation that began in the chaotic moments after the assault. Marcus has consistently seen and acknowledged Zoe's agency and resilience, refusing to reduce her to victimhood even while holding her assailant fully accountable. As Marcus departs for his niece's wedding rehearsal, the Williams family continues their day in San Francisco, visiting the famous Sea Lions at Pier 39, enjoying sourdough bread bowls filled with clam chowder, creating new memories to stand alongside the difficult one that brought them here under such extraordinary circumstances. That evening in their hotel suite, Zoe falls asleep earlier than usual, the emotional and physical toll of the past 2 days finally catching up with her young body's need for recovery. James and Andrea sit in the suite's living area, speaking softly to avoid waking their daughter. "The conference organizers have invited me to expand today's presentation into a feature article for the Journal of Childhood Development," James shares. They believe the case study approach could be valuable for practitioners working with children who have experienced similar trauma. Andrea considers this thoughtfully. "How do you feel about it, about using our family's experience that way?" "Only with your and Zoe's full consent," James assures her, "and only with appropriate anonymization. But I believe there's potential benefit in sharing the frameworks that seem to be helping Zoe process this experience." This approach, the scholar's instinct to derive broader benefit from personal challenge, represents James's particular way of creating meaning from difficulty. Just as Zoe found purpose in seeing her experience contribute to her father's research, James finds purpose in translating their family's journey into insights that might support others. "I think it's a good idea," Andrea decides after consideration, "with proper privacy protections. And perhaps we should consult Zoe's therapist when we return home to ensure we're supporting her optimally through the ongoing legal process." Their phones buzz simultaneously with news alerts, a synchronized intrusion of the public narrative into their private space. Both read the notifications with expressions of surprise that transform into vindication. "Pinnacle Properties has placed Richard Cunningham on administrative leave pending investigation," James reads aloud. "And they've issued a statement disavowing his actions and expressing support for the victims." The corporate distancing continues, the abandonment of Cunningham by his professional allies accelerating as the evidence against him mounts. What began as an attempt to shield him through media connections has transformed into a rush to separate from potential liability and reputational damage. "Justice through self-interest," Andrea observes with the pragmatic assessment of someone who understands institutional behavior. "They're protecting themselves, not doing the right thing for its own sake. The outcome matters more than the motivation in this case," James suggests. Cunningham facing consequences, the truth being acknowledged publicly, these have tangible benefits regardless of why they're happening. This philosophical question, whether justice achieved through self-interest is less meaningful than justice pursued through moral conviction, reflects the academic depth that characterizes their partnership. Even in crisis, they engage with complex ethical considerations, modeling the thoughtful analysis they hope to instill in their daughter. The following morning brings news of Richard Cunningham's bail hearing in Denver. As expected, the prosecution opposed release, citing the emerging pattern of behavior and potential flight risk. The judge, convinced by this argument and the seriousness of the charges, denied bail pending trial. This development, the continued detention of the man who assaulted their daughter, provides a measure of practical relief to the Williams family. The justice system, despite its many documented flaws and biases, appears to be functioning appropriately in this instance, responding to evidence rather than influence. With James's conference obligations complete and the formal statements provided to authorities, the family adjusts their travel plans to return to Chicago the following day, a day earlier than originally scheduled. The decision reflects their desire to return to familiar surroundings, to begin the process of reestablishing normal routines for Zoe's benefit. Before departing San Francisco, however, they have one final commitment, a breakfast meeting with Marcus Reed before he attends his niece's wedding. The location he suggested is a small cafe near Union Square, known for its Belgian waffles and historically significant as one of the first integrated dining establishments in the downtown area during the 1960s. Marcus arrives punctually, dressed for the wedding that will follow later that day. His formal attire, a tailored suit with subtle military precision in its lines, contrasts with the casual weekend atmosphere of the cafe, but his composed presence makes the formality seem natural rather than out of place. The breakfast conversation flows easily, the connection formed through extraordinary circumstances now transitioning into something more normalized but equally meaningful. Zoe shares her drawings from the Japanese tea garden visit. Andrea discusses neurosurgical advances with Marcus, discovering his interest in medical developments through his sister's career as a physician. James and Marcus find common ground in their shared appreciation for jazz, particularly the transformative works of Miles Davis and John Coltrane from the late 1950s. As their meal concludes, Marcus reaches into his jacket pocket and produces a small box. "I have something for Zoe," he explains, "with your permission." James and Andrea exchange a glance of agreement, and Marcus slides the box across the table to Zoe. She opens it carefully to reveal a medallion on a simple chain, the St. Michael medal traditionally associated with protection of those in dangerous professions. "My sister gave this to me before my first deployment," Marcus explains. St. Michael is considered the patron saint of military personnel and law enforcement, but he's also associated with courage and protection of the innocent. "I've carried it through some difficult situations, and now I'd like you to have it." The gift, deeply personal, connecting Zoe to Marcus's own journey through adversity, clearly moves her. She holds the medallion carefully, recognizing the significance of receiving something that carried someone else through their own challenges. "This is very special," Andrea acknowledges, understanding the weight of such a gesture from someone with Marcus's background. "Are you sure?" Marcus nods firmly. "My niece Jasmine is getting married today. She's found her path and her partner. It seems right to pass this on to someone else beginning their journey of courage." This framing, positioning Zoe at the beginning of her own path rather than defining her by a single traumatic incident, offers another layer of narrative integration, another way for her to understand her experience as part of a larger human continuum of challenge and response. "Thank you," Zoe says simply, closing her hand around the medallion. Then with characteristic directness, she asks, "Will we see you again after today?" The question acknowledges the reality they've all been considering, that their paths, which intersected so dramatically aboard Flight 1287, will likely diverge again as normal life resumes. Marcus lives and works primarily on the East Coast. The Williams family is based in Chicago. The intense connection forged through shared crisis faces the natural separation that geography and circumstance impose. "I'd like that," Marcus responds honestly. "Perhaps not immediately with the legal proceedings and my work schedule, but yes, I think our paths will cross again." The assurance, not a false promise of immediate ongoing contact, but a genuine acknowledgement of meaningful connection, satisfies Zoe. She places the medallion around her neck, the symbol of protection and courage resting against her heart. As they prepare to part ways, Marcus to his niece's wedding, the Williams family to their final day in San Francisco before returning home, James extends his hand one last time. "Thank you isn't adequate," he says simply, "but thank you." Marcus accepts the handshake, then surprises himself by pulling James into a brief embrace, the kind of physical acknowledgement of connection that his military background typically discourages, but that feels right in this moment of transition. "Take care of each other," Marcus says as they separate, "and keep in touch about the case developments." Andrea embraces him next, the reserved neurosurgeon allowing herself this expression of gratitude and connection. "We will. And please give our congratulations to your niece and her partner." Finally, Zoe steps forward. Without hesitation, she wraps her arms around Marcus's waist in the straightforward hug of childhood, unencumbered by the self-consciousness that often develops with age. "Thank you for being brave," she says, echoing her earlier sentiment. As they part ways on the San Francisco sidewalk, Marcus heading toward the Presidio Chapel where his niece will be married, the Williams family toward their final day of healing exploration before returning home. The connections formed through crisis remain intact despite physical separation. 1 week later in Chicago, Life has begun returning to a new normal for the Williams family. Zoe has returned to school with the support of administrators and counselors informed about her experience. James has resumed his research and teaching schedule at the university. Andrea has returned to her surgical practice at the medical center. The legal proceedings against Richard Cunningham continue to develop. Additional former employees and associates have come forward with accounts of concerning behavior, creating a pattern evidence that substantially strengthens both the state and federal cases against him. His attorney, recognizing the deteriorating position, has initiated preliminary discussions about a potential plea agreement. Global Media Networks has completed its reversal, now running in-depth stories about anger management issues among executives and the importance of corporate accountability for employee behavior. The cynical pivot from protection to exploitation reflects the amoral calculation of profit-driven media, but it also ensures that the truth of what happened aboard Flight 1287 reaches a wider audience. In the Williams household, Zoe's processing continues with the support of professional therapy and family discussion. She wears Marcus's scent, Michael Medallion, daily, the physical reminder of courage and protection becoming part of her identity and recovery narrative. She's begun writing about her experience in her journal, translating trauma into coherent narrative in the way that James's research has identified as crucial for resilience. On a Tuesday evening, as the family prepares dinner together, Andrea chopping vegetables with surgical precision, James seasoning the main dish, Zoe setting the table, the doorbell rings unexpectedly. James answers to find a delivery person with a large envelope requiring signature. The return address indicates it's from the San Francisco FBI field office. Inside, they find a letter from Agent Cardenas updating them on the case status, confirming that federal charges have been formally filed and that the U.S. Attorney's Office has assigned a prosecutor specializing in hate crimes to handle the case. Accompanying the letter is a DVD labeled Complete Recording, Flight 1287 Incident Official Evidence Copy. A note from Agent Cardenas explains that while the evidence remains confidential within the legal proceedings, they've been authorized to provide this copy to the Williams family as the directly affected parties. After dinner, once Zoe has gone upstairs to complete her homework, James and Andrea discuss whether to view the recording. They've seen brief portions during their statements to authorities, but neither has watched the complete version that Marcus captured. "I think we should," Andrea finally decides. "Not to re-traumatize ourselves, but to fully understand what we're dealing with as the case proceeds." James agrees, and they insert the DVD into their rarely used player. The recording begins before the assault, capturing the escalating tension, Richard Cunningham's increasingly aggressive behavior, and the racial slurs muttered under his breath that many passengers likely didn't hear, but that Marcus's positioning allowed him to record clearly. Then comes the moment of impact, Cunningham's hand striking Zoe's face with the distinctive sound that cut through the ambient aircraft noise. The visible shock on surrounding passengers' faces. The momentary freeze before reaction begins. And then, something they hadn't fully registered in the chaos of the moment, Marcus's movements as he rose from his seat and approached. The recording, still running as he secured it in his shirt pocket, captures his voice as he restrained Cunningham, calm, controlled, but with unmistakable authority. "You've just assaulted a child," Marcus's voice states on the recording. "I'm former military. I've been trained to recognize threats, and you've been escalating toward violence for the past 20 minutes. Everything has been recorded, including the racial slurs you've been muttering. You're going to return to your seat now and remain there until authorities take you into custody. If you resist or become aggressive again, I am prepared to use necessary force to protect that child and everyone else on this aircraft. Do you understand?" The clarity of this statement, its precision in identifying both the violation and the consequences, demonstrates the training and experience that allowed Marcus to intervene effectively when others remained frozen or uncertain. It represents exactly the kind of protective boundary that children need from adults when facing threat or harm. James and Andrea exchange a look of renewed appreciation for Marcus's intervention. The recording continues, documenting the aftermath, the flight attendant's response, the captain's announcement of diversion to Denver, the securing of Cunningham in restraints. Throughout, Marcus's voice occasionally appears, providing calm direction or reassurance to those nearby. When the recording ends, they sit in silence for a moment, processing this objective documentation of an experience they lived through subjectively. The distance provided by the recording, seeing the incident through Marcus's perspective rather than their own immediate emotional experience, offers new insights into what actually transpired and how it was handled. "We need to thank him again," Andrea says finally. "More thoroughly than we did in San Francisco, what he did in those moments." She trails off, the neurosurgeon's vocabulary inadequate to express the significance of appropriate intervention in a child's moment of trauma. "We will," James agrees. "And I think this recording should be part of the case study for my journal article, with appropriate permissions and redactions." The contrast between Cunningham's escalation and Marcus's de-escalation represents exactly the adult behavior patterns that impact childhood trauma outcomes. Their discussion is interrupted by the sound of the front door opening, Zoe returning from walking their elderly neighbor's dog, a responsibility she's maintained despite recent events. Her voice calls out, "Mom, Dad, Mrs. Garcia gave me cookies to bring home." She says they're Mexican wedding cookies from her grandmother's recipe. The ordinary moment, a child returning from a simple neighborhood errand, bringing shared food, connecting with an older community member, represents the normal life they're working to reclaim and preserve despite extraordinary interruption. Zoe's continued engagement with regular responsibilities, her maintenance of community connections, speaks to the resilience they've nurtured throughout her development. As Zoe enters the living room, she notices the freeze frame on the television screen, an image from the flight recording. Her expression registers recognition but not distress, another indication of her progressing integration of the experience. "Is that Mr. Reed's video?" she asks matter-of-factly. "Yes," James confirms, not hiding the truth but monitoring her reaction carefully. "Agent Cardenas sent us a copy for our records as the case moves forward." Zoe nods, processing this information. Then, with the perspective-shifting capacity that continues to impress her parents, she says, "I'm glad he was recording. Now everyone can see what really happened, not just what that man's company tried to say happened." This insight, recognizing the power of objective documentation to counter narrative manipulation, demonstrates her developing understanding of how truth functions in a world of competing interests and perspectives. It's a sophisticated awareness for an 11-year-old, accelerated by direct experience with both injustice and its remedy. "That's exactly right," Andrea confirms, making space beside her on the couch for Zoe to join them. "The truth matters even when some people try to change it." As Zoe settles between her parents, sharing Mrs. Garcia's cookies and recounting her conversation with their neighbor, the Williams family continues their journey of healing and integration. The incident aboard Flight 1287, traumatic and unjust as it was, has become incorporated into their family narrative not as a defining catastrophe, but as one experience among many, significant but not all-encompassing. Aboard that flight, in that moment when Richard Cunningham's hand connected with Zoe's face, multiple paths opened before them. They could have been defined by victimization, by rage, by helplessness in the face of injustice. Instead, through a combination of their own resilience factors and the intervention of someone who recognized the importance of immediate boundary setting, they found a different path, one of accountability, integration, and continued growth. 3 months later, as winter settles over Chicago, an envelope arrives at the Williams home bearing a Washington, D.C. postmark. Inside is a formal invitation to Marcus Reed's promotion ceremony at the Pentagon, where he will receive recognition for his work developing trauma-informed security protocols for government facilities. A handwritten note accompanies the invitation. "Your family's experience has informed my current project in ways I never anticipated. Zoe's resilience continues to inspire this work. I'd be honored if you could attend, though I understand completely if the timing or distance makes it difficult." James, Andrea, and Zoe gather around the kitchen table to discuss this unexpected connection. The promotion ceremony falls during Zoe's spring break from school. The logistics are manageable. The question becomes whether returning to this connection, this reminder of difficult experience, serves their collective healing or risks reopening partially healed wounds. "I want to go," Zoe states with characteristic directness. "I want to see Mr. Reed get recognized for helping people. And I want to show him how I'm doing better now." Her parents exchange a glance, recognizing the healthy impulse in this desire, not avoidance of difficult memories, but integration of them into a larger narrative of recovery and connection. Zoe doesn't want to pretend the incident never happened. She wants to acknowledge it while demonstrating her continued growth beyond it. "Then we'll go," James decides, reaching for his phone to begin making travel arrangements. As he does, Zoe touches the St. Michael medallion that has rarely left her neck since San Francisco. The symbol of protection has become something more in her understanding, a reminder of the courageous choice to act when action is needed, to protect others when protection is possible, to stand firmly in truth when falsehood surrounds you. These lessons, embodied by Marcus Reed on Flight 1287, but now incorporated into Zoe's own developing character, represent the ultimate transformation of trauma into growth. The incident that began with hatred and violence has generated new connections, new insights, and new commitments to justice that extend far beyond that moment at 37,000 feet. In Denver, Richard Cunningham awaits trial, his corporate connections having abandoned him as evidence mounted, his attempts to distort the narrative thoroughly defeated by objective documentation. His journey toward accountability continues through the legal system, with potential for eventual redemption through genuine recognition of harm caused and amends made. In Washington, D.C., Marcus Reed continues his work translating military and security experience into civilian protection protocols, his perspective enriched by witnessing both the vulnerability and the resilience of a child facing injustice. The connection formed with the Williams family has expanded his understanding of impact, of consequence, of the ripple effects that extend from moments of intervention. And in Chicago, the Williams family continues their journey, James incorporating their experience into research that may help other children navigate trauma, Andrea bringing enhanced empathy to her work with patients facing life-altering medical events, and Zoe developing a deeper understanding of both human capacity for harm and human potential for courage. Their story, begun in the confined space of an aircraft cabin where the worst and best of human nature manifested in swift succession, continues to unfold in new directions, touching other lives, creating new possibilities. The incident aboard Flight 1287 remains part of their history, acknowledged but not defining, integrated into a larger narrative of resilience, connection, and growth. If you've been moved by this extraordinary story of courage, justice, and healing, please take a moment to subscribe and share your thoughts in the comments below. Your own experiences of witnessing or standing up against injustice matter to our community, and we'd love to hear how this story resonated with you. Thank you for joining us on this powerful journey.